Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. The mayor has called the meeting to order. Mayor Roscoe.
Present.
Councilmember Bracken.
Present.
Councilmember Kaplan.
Here.
Councilmember London.
Here.
Vice Mayor Sardinius.
Present.
Councilmember Stoner.
Here.
Councilmember Vasquez.
Here.
Mr. Mayor, we do have a quorum. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Ms. Stoner, would you lead us with the flag?
I pledge allegiance to the
flag
flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We have an invocation from Reverend Willie Allen Faella, St. Christopher's by the Sea.
Good evening.
Evening.
Gracious God, bless the leaders of this village, that they may be a people at peace among themselves and a blessing to everyone in this community. Send down upon those who hold office in this village of Key Biscayne the spirit of wisdom, charity, and justice, that their steadfast purpose, that with steadfast purpose, they may faithfully serve in their offices to promote the well-being of all people. This we ask in your holy name. Amen.
Amen. The next item, Mr. Mayor, is brief comments by council.
All of us are very concerned and touched by the wildfires in California. I'm sure everyone's kept abreast of that, so keep them in your prayers so that they can pull through. We know what it is to be hit by natural disasters. So, anything else? All right.
The next item is public comments.
Public comments. All right. I got a lot of cards. First speaker, Ann Tainter.
Ann Tanner, 170 Ocean Lane Drive. Actually, I was here in reference to the California fires and to say, well, we could have the same disasters here. We could have a fire in the condos. We could have a hurricane. So in the future, when you're talking about budgets, do not cut the fire department. It's why we incorporated. It's a major safety issue for this community. And I'm sure there's lots of other ways to cut the budget. I mean, we could cut out some of the consultants as far as I'm concerned. But anyway, thank you. Have a good evening.
Thank you. Tony Godinez.
Yes, 121 Cape Florida Drive. I've been here before. I just wanted to know, I sent a memo out by email to everybody. I don't know if you have, I have some extra copies here if you didn't get it. Okay, I wanted to bring to light, I want to ask, first of all, has any headway been done on the discussions we had last time, reference permitting? I'm living with a 10-year construction. They just did some landscaping, but they haven't finished. So I'm going on 11 years of construction. And I don't think anyone in this council can say they've experienced that. I'd just like to know, are we moving forward with any plan on this? Because it's patently wrong. And, you know, I don't want to be hurt. I think it's wrong to hear that the regulations say this is it and we have to accept it. If something's patently wrong, you don't succeed the first time, try again. And you bombard them there with a lot of facts. I mean, there's so many facts that you could hit them with. At the 5-year point, just insist on landscaping. Put the sod down, that cuts down to the dust, the noise, the grime, everything, you know? I mean, and that's not a very expensive part. Just have them put sod down. You know, I'd just like to know if anything's being done. Are we moving forward in this? Your building inspector, in my email, he told me he was losing patience with me. He cannot talk to me like this because he has never had the experience of living 10 years under that we have, okay? And I still would like to know what was his reasoning. I met him twice. The last time I was here and at the building department. So he told me, when I asked him, how is this thing moving along? Like I'm asking everybody here on this council, he said, I'm losing patience with you. And if he denies it, let's talk to his assistant. She was right there.
The building inspector?
The director of the whole department, Gauger, Mr. Gauger. Okay?
Thank you, Tony. We will address it later in the meeting.
All right, thank you.
Andy Herrera.
Good evening, Council, Mr. Manager, Attorney, Ms. Clerk. Happy New Year to
Your
everybody.
name and address.
923 Crandon Boulevard. I'm here tonight, a little bit concerned about our children, as usual. This is my call. Recently, the endangerment of children in our village have been placed at risk, especially one child whose photograph have been viral in social media while the police was taking an incident report. This child does something that we have to address immediately: the harassing, the public shaming of a family. A single mom was told online and in social media that she's currently an employee of this village, or the village now works in our community. I mean, the way that we as neighbors addressing others in this way, especially placing a children photograph while the police report is taken publicly without the mom's consent, is something that we have to worry about the safety of the children and the child. So I would like to please to address with the chief of police is not here tonight, but this cannot happen in our community. We cannot discriminate in any form, shape. This behavior is unacceptable, and hopefully this family they will find the legal revenues to find a solution. But I'm asking you that this picture, while the police report was taking an incident publicly with this child face exposed, telling that he is study at the community center, that's unacceptable. And we cannot allow that. Those things are hard consequences on this life, in this kid's life, probably. I hope that we're not. But this is wrong. And this is my main concern. I want you guys to address it immediately and have this person to take down this immoral. I have no words to express how you feel. So please, I want you guys to take a look at that and to address immediately, because it's affecting a family. Second thing I would like to mention tonight is Mayor Rasco is the spearheading for the St. Agnes turf that's going to be built soon. I'm happy because you are taking that project, But I would like to please also, since we also put the lights of the St. Agnes fields, we're investing so much money in a field, in a property that doesn't belong to our community, where we're spending our tax money there. So there's no bathroom for the children to go. There's no drinkable water. There's not even a shade area. So we're investing huge amount of money, and then the main things that requires for our children to enjoy it, a facility, is not available. And there's no excuse for our government to negotiate with St. Agnes or get some kind of agreement, but this has to be built together. We don't want something to spend $1 million and having a lacking of the main things that our children needs to enjoy that facility. So I would like you guys to enjoy it, and please, on September, when the project is done, to have everything ready so our children are safe and happy. Thank you.
Next speaker, Josie Valdez Hurtado.
Good evening, all. I'm Josie Valdez Hurtado, 600 Great Tree Drive. I offer my sincere congratulations to all three members recently elected elected to serve for the best interest of the Key Biscayne community. You have recently heard, and I will continue to hear, concerns about the most urgent issues at stake. I have addressed them using my 3 minutes here and also writing in the opinion pages of the Islander News. Now, and especially for the benefit of those who are new here, I would like to call your attention to the following. Many residents with extensive academic knowledge and professional expertise have repeatedly offered their help based on scientific data and well-researched proposals. They have also volunteered to serve on related boards, only to be totally ignored. Their experiences span from traffic control to lobbying, to budget analysis and allocations, to zoning, to construction, to sports, and so on. Again, for the benefit of the new people here, the two new ones, I would like to call your attention to recurrent practices that impact the Council's objectivity when making decisions and voting on items that come before you. The mere appearance of a conflict of interest should be avoided if you are to be trusted by us. For example, when selecting board members, when putting forth requests and proposals, when selecting vendors, consultants, and employees, and when interacting with associations or foundations. You are trusted by us to clearly identify a strict criteria and code of conduct for the manager to follow and those who work under him. As part of the unpaid responsibility that you so willingly have embraced, respect and transparency in governance for us, the taxpayers, the residents, and the voters should be a priority, especially during times like now, when your decisions might totally change the village's way of life. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you. Cecile Sanchez.
Cecile Sanchez, 260 Cypress Drive. I just come to do this. I support Ed. I think he is making a point. I would like to know when is what he discussed in some meeting that the Key Biscayne Independent, we learned about it through the Key Biscayne Independent. When are you going to discuss it? We're interested. I think he makes a lot of sense, and I hope, please, that
On the 28th. I think we have a meeting set up to discuss the big dig on the 28th.
On the 28th.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you.
Charles Collins.
Charles, excuse me, I'm getting over a cold. Charles Collins, 1121 Crandon Boulevard. I'm here to speak on bifurcating the electric, as we did through the campaign once again. To tie into the big dig, we could make a big dig and a little bore, because as we've discussed, electricity goes through a pipe that's bored into the ground, not a hole that we dig and put in the ground. So despite what's been said here over the past about the problems with having one hole and we should put everything in the hole and there's going to be this guy. No, if we read the Kimberly Horn report, we'll see the only cost savings is the paving of the roads once the holes are dug. And I would love to take you guys on tours of other neighborhoods that are undergrounding. There is virtually no disturbance of the pavement. They can do it in the right of way. It's a great thing. So let's look at it. I think it's an equally long time frame, but as you recall from the Kimberly Horn study, there's a lot of options we can add in there. We can do street lighting. There's a bunch of other stuff. And as you recall, there's going to be issues with homes not being up to code. That's a whole nother project within the project that we could easily start now. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Luis de la Cruz.
Happy New Year. Luis
New
de la
Year.
Cruz, 640 Allendale Road. So I wanted to thank the manager for putting together the workshop that he did this past week. It was a wonderful opportunity for us to see what the village is planning on doing in the Garden District. I was dismayed that a few of you weren't able to make it. I know that Oscar was out of town on something important, and I know that Mike Bracken was out also. But other than that, Mayor was there, Nancy was there, and Ed was there. I didn't see Frank or Fernando, and this is so important that you guys have to ask the manager to give you that presentation that you missed. Okay, because guess what? What we are going to do in the Garden District is exactly what we should be doing for the rest of the village of Key Biscayne. And I fully support it, and you've got to see it. It's just so logical, so reasonable, so financially responsible, which we need to start thinking about, okay? Because when we start talking about hundreds of millions of dollars, when we don't need to do it, is, this is what we need to pay attention to. We need to go to these places. We need to go to these workshops that the manager's putting together for you with the experts that come to those workshops. On your thing here on 10B, the exhibits didn't come out on the thing, so weren't able to look at any of that. I was just pointing it out so you can try to fix it at some point. Okay, it's no big deal. There's two items that are on the village manager's reports and recommendations later on. One of them is the discussion of driveway pervious materials requirements. Essential discussion. Guys need to pay attention to this. It's not just, Jeremy or the manager standing up here and telling you something and then you, okay, well, fine. We are way, way behind everybody else in the county with respect to impervious materials that we're still using in all of our, driveways. And I keep harping on that, and I keep telling people, and I keep sending messages, and, I'm not on the council, so they're not going to really listen to me too much, although, I make myself pretty much of a pest. But it's essential that we need to start working on this, okay? We can't continue to put impervious materials on our swale areas and on our streets. I could point out right now 5 different houses on Harbor Drive that have been built within the past 5 years that are totally impervious. The whole front of the house is impervious. It's just not acceptable when we're thinking about spending hundreds of millions of dollars on resiliency. Okay, you can't say that out of one side of the mouth and then let this happen on the other side of the mouth. The other thing is the Rickenbacker Causeway priorities. Essential that we pay attention to that. The last time that we didn't pay attention, we delivered to the county our proposal for the Virginia Key Causeway Master Plan, which made absolutely no sense. Now, since then, I think, that we have fixed it, that we have changed it. I've been told that we had. I haven't seen the official document because I know that they're working on it, and you got to pay an engineer in order to change that. But please pay attention to this when it's coming up with Jeremy and the manager. Okay? Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Brett Moss.
Good evening, council members. Brett Moss, 152 West Mashta Drive. I'm here to talk about and in support of Councilmember Bracken's item about bifurcating Zone 1, something that I've been trying to do for almost 2 years, and I think that we've brought it up a couple of times up here where I've asked if we can bifurcate it, and the manager says, yes, it is possible. Why do I support that? Is because of my concern with the financial situation that's going on Zone 1, and the majority of that is the stormwater portion. And I believe that the stormwater portion is going to hit a huge delay. And there's things that you guys are going to have to deal with. And it's going to unnecessarily delay putting in the underground utilities. Last month I was here to ask you guys to have a discussion on the independent cost analysis, which did not occur. I think you guys need to have these discussions as fast as possible because the design is continuing, money's being, or billings are coming in, money is going out, and the faster that you guys can get on top of this, the better it is for our financial situation. When we first voted on the work order for AECOM over $4 million, it was presented to us that this project was going to cost us $50 million. And both Ed and I agreed on that work order because of the information that we had. And unsuccessfully, you and I tried to bring the price down lower by lowering the services. That's the way it goes. But I guarantee if it was at $88 million or even $80 million, that vote would have been very different. And today, we're still continuing this design with this understanding, and that's very concerning. I think that the question is if this is too expensive for you guys to continue on the stormwater, why are we going to continue paying money for a design that we're not going to do? That's an important question that you guys need to ask yourselves. Because if you guys are concerned of it, I think this is the time that you need to start talking about alternatives, and I'm glad that you guys are going to meet on January 28th. I think that what I would ask for you to do is tonight have the discussion when you're on Councilmember Bracken's item or whichever item. I know there's like 3 of them. I think Councilmember Stoner, you have an item on there as well. And maybe just pause the design so no billing happens until the 28th so that you guys can have a real discussion about this independent study, if this is too expensive for you or not, and at least tell the people what you guys are thinking so that we understand if this is what you guys want to continue moving forward or not. That's what I asked for you for tonight. Thank you very much.
Edgardo Comel.
Hello, good afternoon, good evening.
Your
I'm
name and
representing
address.
the owner on 725 North Mashta Drive that is requesting a change on the carport ordinance.
I'm sorry, sir, can you say your name and address?
Yes, Edgar Kamel. My address is 12001 Southwest 128th Court, Miami, Florida. And I've been working on the island for quite a while, residents. And there is an ordinance that carports has to be open, and we've been discussing that at the building department that perhaps lots that there are 15,000 square feet and bigger, they can have a see-through gate for the sense of protecting their vehicles, nighttime security, and also in the case of a hurricane, you're not quite open with your vehicles in the front of the properties. The reason for the see-through gate is to make sure that those carports are not enclosed or converted into gyms or, like everybody else, the storage in the garage becomes a storage. At the same time, also, we're kind of proposing that if this request is being granted, that something will be worked out with the right-of-ways in a sense of there are products that you can utilize for water retention and help out a little bit with the water problem that we have on the streets in Key Biscayne in the heavy-duty rain times. So it's just a consideration that we can produce or establish these gates for security and also for hurricane protections and still see through. You can still be able to see through, and that will be for the lots that are 15,000 square feet and bigger. That's it.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes, hello, good evening. How are you? My name is Francisco Neri, 960 Mariner Drive. I'm here to support Edgar's petition, the just consideration that was just laid out. Our property is within the standards that he described as a 15,000 square foot lot, and we have a carport, and we see definitely the benefit of having that see-through door being able to be installed for the same reasons that he said, safety, aesthetics, and the benefit that that would represent to the property to have that additional security and safety. So appreciate it if you can take that consideration.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you. Have a good night.
Okay. Public comments is now complete.
The next item, Mr. Mayor, is the agenda. Approval, deferrals, additions, deletions, substitutions, withdrawals.
I have some revisions. On 11B3, I would like to just delete all the language except law enforcement, that's my item. And on 4, stormwater design, and delete all the other language.
Stormwater.
Nope, I'm leaving stormwater design and deleting the other language. The compressor peer review. Compressor was a typo anyway.
I'd like to add discussion on pausing the engineering contract for the stormwater system.
Where were you cutting off your statement in number 3?
Compressor.
I'm only leaving law enforcement and I'm deleting everything else.
Anything else?
Move to adopt as amended.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. The next item is, a special presentation by the Sustainability Advisory Board.
So I understand that Derek wanted to have it deferred to the next meeting because there
next
was a
meeting.
problem with the notices that went out.
Will do.
Thank you.
As well as the other 2 presentations
Okay,
to February.
sounds good.
Mentioned earlier. Okay. The next item is the consent agenda.
Moved. Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. The next item is the second reading of an ordinance of the Village of Key Biscayne, Florida, amending the village's comprehensive plan regarding public utility uses within all future land use map categories, providing for transmittal, providing for conflicts, providing for severability, and providing for an effective date.
Moved.
Second.
Public hearing on this ordinance is now open. Seeing no one come forward, public hearing is closed. Discussion on the ordinance.
I have a couple of comments.
Go right ahead.
On the public recreation and open space section, I don't think the language should go in there as it is without any limiting parameters. Or in the alternative, excluding from that the village green. And then on the waterfront recreation and open space section, adding the limiting parameter that it should be underground only.
I'm sorry, Nancy, can you repeat the first, Councilmember, can you repeat the first?
Sure, on the public recreation and open space section, that we need to add some limiting parameters. How much of the space could be used for this purpose, percentage-wise or purpose-wise, and also or in the alternative, to exclude the village green from that provision.
Similar thrust. I think we missed the most important part of this to me, which was something in the nature of site design, case by case, to ensure that whatever was going to be installed would be designed and placed in a manner to minimally affect the primary use of the area that it was going into. Getting to the same point that Nancy was
The other thing we could do is basically limit it to the perimeter, so many feet in from the perimeter of a property. So therefore, it wouldn't interfere with the building envelope in most cases. Just a question of how many feet you'd come in, 10 feet, 15 feet, whatever.
I think a site,
I'm not sure that addresses my issue, or your and Francis.
Well, what's your issue? Do I understand that? You don't want it to,
I don't want whatever is built
yeah.
To be unsightly?
not only to be unsightly, but to impede the purpose of the property.
Oh, okay.
The
I
primary use
understand
of the
what you're saying.
property.
You said a clause to that effect in there.
I don't think it was controversial to deal with this in a kind of a site plan review context, but it just didn't wind up in the ordinance.
No,
But when Nancy says
yeah,
makes a lot of sense.
just to clarify, this is our comprehensive plan. We had made, similar to what Councilmember Kaplan's saying, those changes to our zoning code. And any site plan in a PROS, public recreation open space, does require a hearing and would come before this council. So this is simply our comprehensive plan, which is our goals, objectives, and policies. So we don't really get into the real site-specific regs. I know that there are some references in here regarding to height and lot coverage and the like, but that's really an exception. Usually that's only dealt with in the zoning code. And we actually specifically dealt with this in the zoning code. I think Jeremy can talk about it when we came forward, I think, last year.
Yeah, and I think that's worth reiterating, right? The comprehensive plan is your big picture. It's the goals, objectives, policies. So it's like, yes, these uses are allowed, but if you want to, really when it gets specific about regulating the uses and setbacks and open space and building envelopes, that's the best place for that is in the zoning code. And it's pretty well covered in the zoning ordinance that the limitations on what can go into parks, recreation, open space, that's covered there. The fact that it's an accessory use, not a primary use, that's covered there. The fact that there's definitely a site plan review process for anything that's coming in. So just like a private property, that has to come to council for approval. It has to go through a public process before anything's located.
May I respond?
Yes.
Okay. This is really establishing a policy, right? I understand we have the zoning code, but this is stating our policy. And given the fact that we have a lot of discussion about Harbor Park and how much of it we could use or couldn't use and all of that, I would like to at least get the village green and the waterfront recreation / open space, make a policy statement either excluding or limiting the use of those areas.
So let me present a scenario where there could be an issue and where we would still be covered by the zoning ordinance. And I would say, please read this in conjunction with the regulations of the zoning ordinance. It's not great policy to have something redundant or even slightly contradictory between the two ordinances. It makes executing things very, very difficult. But for instance, if we limited it to nothing on the village green and we have a transformer that we need to locate there as part of the undergrounding of utilities, an undergrounding electrical utility, we may not be able to locate it there because it's something that serves not just the village green, but serves the surrounding area. You know, we could be handcuffing ourselves in the process of underground utilities by some limiting that, and that could be transformers you really can't locate underground. So that would be an instance where that could be an issue. And again, anything does have to come to council for approval. And we're very much restricted on location size, et cetera, in the zoning ordinance.
And I could just add one practical aspect, just unrelated to policy, but just practical. Keeping item regulations in the zoning code as opposed to the comprehensive plan. The comprehensive plan requires review by the state and other agencies, and they weigh in on our ordinance, whereas on our zoning ordinance, that ordinance does not get transmitted to those agencies for review and comment. So that is just one practical aspect too, which it is easier, it's a quicker process to amend our ordinance, and we also don't have the oversight of the state and other regional agencies, the county, looking at what, commenting on what we're doing.
So what you're saying is the proper place to make that change would be in the zoning and not here.
I think you control it, you have more control over it and less agency comment or other, the state looking at and commenting on what you're doing. Yes.
My devil's advocate perspective is that all of this is correct but incomplete. And to add the protective policy in the comp plan seems valuable to me because of the compatibility requirements between zoning and comp plan. So the principle that's at stake is simply trying to protect to the fullest extent possible the primary use, despite the fact that a utility installation has to go in. I see nothing controversial, redundant, or confusing about including that in the comp plan. Suggestion.
I agree.
So are you saying now, Chad, that has to go back for approval by the state?
We would, after we adopt this ordinance, we will transmit it back to the state. Do I think that they would comment? Probably unlikely, because their authority is limited to areas of important state concern. I don't think this would trigger that, but this ordinance will go back to the state for review, and they'll issue a notice of compliance with the state laws or not.
Yeah, just to reiterate, this was an ordinance that came before council close, I think, about 8 or 9 months ago. And it's been in review by state. And so this is why we were delayed to bring it here. So I think any alteration between first and second reading would have to be re-reviewed by the state, but it's part of the process.
And if it takes another 8 or 9 months, what's the difference?
No, I don't think it will. We will make the change and transmit it up to the state. I don't think that they're not going to make us come back to us another reading. They're not going to do that. I think if you stick to the language, what Councilmember Kaplan was saying, a more policy statement as opposed to like a compatibility type statement, as Councilmember Kaplan said, that is a more common statement in the comp plan as opposed to really site-specific regulations. So, I think that's more of a consistent policy.
Do we need a motion to add that?
I think it's a stronger presentation if we do, and it's our comp plan is DNA level important to us, and to have an obvious recital to what we not only intend but have already built into zoning.
Nancy, are you good with us making a motion to
Was
modify
consensus
Frank?
of council?
Can we hear the motion exactly then?
You want to amend the,
Yeah, but I want to use Frank's language. You were saying,
Could you repeat it, Frank?
I haven't really drafted it. The concept is
the concept shouldn't interfere with the principal use.
impede the principal use. of
the policy that's embedded in all of the districts. If there's an installation that's required to address a public service need, we do our best in conjunction with the site plan review process that's part of the zoning code to minimize the adverse impact on the primary use.
Could you please make an effort to put the microphone closer to your mouth? Because we can't hear.
Oh, yeah, it's
The people is complaining on the chat that they cannot listen.
Thank you.
The audio is not here.
But Chad, before I make the motion, the way it will most smoothly sail through upon review by the state would be just to put that language in those two sections?
No. I think you could have an overarching, like what Councilmember Kaplan is saying, statement that public utilities have to be compatible with developed compatibly with the main permitted use. I mean, I think that's fine. I think we can add it into each land use category. It's consistent with our zoning code amendment that we made last year, where we actually have very similar language as far as screening and compatibility, so,
I mean, I think that's a better presentation.
yeah.
Okay, so I move that a provision be added that states that any public utility installations be developed to be compatible with the intended use of the property.
Second.
It's not quite compatibility, it
primary
is an
intent.
adverse introduction of a different thing. And the idea is to minimize that or mitigate it to the fullest extent possible.
I seconded it.
Is it clear? I'm not sure it's clear.
Chad, you know what you want?
Chad, are you clear with what she's looking for, and could you devise the actual language for us to then?
Okay, so between the two, I think that Councilmember Stoner suggested that it be compatible with the main permitted use. I think Councilmember Kaplan extended that to mean that it would minimize or mitigate the impacts of this use and be compatible with the main permitted use. I think he's looking for that overall feeling that that when you develop such a facility, it's going to be developed in a way to mitigate the impacts on the main permitted use.
The main one, sorry? Okay. I didn't hear
The main permitted
The main
use.
permitted
The main
use.
permitted primary use.
Harbor Park is a great example of how this has application.
Absolutely.
If we didn't have an aesthetic outcome in mind, we could plop it anywhere.
Okay, Chad, is that clear?
Yeah, I'm clear, yeah.
You're clear? Okay. There's a motion to amend the ordinance
Second.
that's already been put before us and seconded. Any other further discussion on the amendment?
With the amendment from Councilmember Kaplan.
It's a combination.
It's
It's a combination with an oversight from our attorney.
Ms. Stoner's amendment.
Motion, yes.
And her motion, yes.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Okay, now on the ordinance as amended.
Councilmember London,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Sardinius,
Yes.
Councilmember Stoner,
Yes.
Councilmember Vasquez.
Yes.
Mayor Roscoe.
Yes.
Councilmember Bracken.
Yes.
Councilmember Kaplan.
Yes.
The ordinance is adopted on second reading as amended.
Was there a second part,
It's done.
Councilman? No? Good.
The next item is the second reading of an ordinance of the Village of Key Biscayne, Florida, amending Article 2, Police Officers and Firefighters Retirement Plan of Chapter 23 of the Village Code of Ordinances relating to the implementation of the conclusive firefighter cancer presumption established by Section 112.1816 Florida statutes and the rebuttal disease presumptions established by Sections 112.18, 112.181, and 175.231 Florida statutes, amending Sections 23-48 distribution of benefits, 23-49 miscellaneous provisions, 23-58 federal tax provisions, and 23-59 qualified health insurance premium distributions of the Village Code of Ordinances relating to pension plan qualifications, providing for severability, providing for codification, providing for conflicts, and providing for an effective date.
Move.
Second.
Okay. Mr. Gutierrez? Are you going to speak on it, Chad or Steve?
We'll both answer questions depending on whether it's personnel related or whether it's legal related.
So,
Okay.
so this matter came, I believe, as a request from the pension, either the board or the pension administrator, and it was to align with current law to make our pension plan align with current
State
statutes relating to the firefighter cancer preemption.
Okay.
We have no choice.
It's on second reading. Public hearing is now open. Seeing no one come forward, public hearing is closed. Mr. London,
Yes, sir.
you spoke.
I said basically we have no choice. It's state law. It'll just affect our pension contributions, but at this point in time, it shouldn't be significant.
Okay. Any further discussion? Seeing none, call the roll.
Vice Mayor Sardinius?
Yes.
Councilmember Stoner?
Yes.
Councilmember Vasquez?
Yes.
Mayor Roscoe?
Yes.
Councilmember Bracken?
Yes.
Councilmember Kaplan?
Yes.
Councilmember London?
Yes.
The ordinance is adopted on second reading. The next item is the second reading of an ordinance of the Village of Key Biscayne, Florida, amending Chapter 19 Park Rules and Regulations of the Village Code of Ordinances to create Section 19-19 Park Hours relating to park hours within the village, providing for severability, providing for codification, providing for conflicts, and providing for an effective date.
Move.
Second.
Moved and seconded.
Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. This is our second reading on this, and we're requesting that we put in the park hours into the ordinance that we already have. This enhances our safety and security and allows us to maintain peace and the quality of life. This is a tool that we utilize. It's open, and we'll have a lot of discretion on how we're going to enforce it.
Okay. Questions?
Yeah, basically, we're saying to people they can't use the parks after dark, even if they are citizens or residents of Key Biscayne,
No.
even though they're not causing any problems. Is that right?
If they're causing a nuisance,
No, they're not causing a nuisance.
so we have discretion in that.
No, but the
Can I-
rule
can I-
says you can't use it, right? That's what we're
This
passing.
this is only for parks that aren't lit.
Correct.
So the only parks that aren't
Some of
lit
the beach park.
is the beach park and maybe some of the pocket parks. I don't know.
Sometimes
But it's
the
not the Village Green and it's not the beach.
Well, that's what I want to check too. So
Okay,
I
hold
wanna
on, hold on.
intervene on that.
So basically, am I correct, Jason, that someone would go to a park, to the beach park in the evening, once this ordinance passed, even though you don't enforce it, he's breaking or she's breaking the law?
Correct, according to the ordinance.
Do we really want to make our citizens lawbreakers?
Right.
Even if you're not going to enforce it?
We will enforce it. So it's a tool that's utilized
I understand
in certain
that.
situations. It's not,
I understand
every
that.
situation is unique, and we
Yeah,
use
but
our discretion
what-
in those.
What Councilmember Lennon, if I may, what he's saying is that effectively somebody is breaking the law if they're standing in the beach park stargazing after nightfall.
Yeah, I
So
find
what
my
his
own
his
problem
comment
as well,
is,
yeah.
do we really want to make our residents law breakers?
Well, they're not going to be lawbreakers.
But
I
they
mean,
are, they're
we
breaking the law.
We'll ask them to leave. So we also have, so just to segue into it, so you kind of understand a little more into what we're trying to do here is, we have a program that we have at all of our parks, and we have them at the businesses too, which is called the We Cares, and then big signs. And what that does is that allows us to be agents, representatives, when those individuals, property owners are not there. So we already have that in place. That is a state statute that we utilize for. So we asked them, could you please leave? The park is closed. And so we have that avenue as well, but this is so that we can actually post the times on there, so the residents and visitors know exactly what it is.
The example that we talked about that I think, wanted to try to find a way to build in is those occasions when Jupiter aligns with Mars. And people want to be out and stare up at the awesomeness of the cosmos.
Yeah. So that's where our discretion comes in, and we allow for those things to occur. Again, there's other cutouts in it where, like, if they're at the Village Green and they got lights and something's going on in activity, it's fine. If at the beach park, there's an activity where it's sanctioned through the village, and that's fine as well. That's authorized.
But as Ed was pointing out, if somebody just wants to go up to the beach and look at the stars, technically they're breaking the law. And that's a little unfortunate. I mean, isn't there a way to stop the hoodlums with sound noise ordinances or some other means and method to enforce the issue that you're trying to?
So
go
we do
after?
have those. We have them for noise ordinances. We have them for curfew violations, things of that nature. This is just another tool in there.
Can you just, when you say it's another tool, I mean, could just give me an example of how this tool would be utilized versus what you currently have? Just set it in a situation. You know, two kids are up there doing X, Y, Z, and you don't want them up there because they're breaking the rules, because they're causing a disturbance.
Let me help you with this, because I spoke with the chief about this, and I had a problem with it and do have a problem with it. And he explained to me that there was an instance where there was someone in the beach park, and the police went and I guess told the kids or whatever to get out, and we're told that the officer didn't have jurisdiction and didn't have any jurisdiction to do anything about it. Do you know anything about that circumstance?
I'm unfamiliar with that, but I can
Okay.
tell you that for the 21 years that I've been here, we've utilized the We Care program. And if there is an issue like that, we take care of it. And yeah, we have the authority to get them out. We issue them a
So why
trespass
do we
warning.
need this?
So this defines it, and it lets visitors and residents know that sunset, you're supposed to be out of the park until sunrise. It makes it more clear for the violators.
So if someone was in the park, this is my only last
Okay.
question.
No, go ahead, ma'am.
If someone is in the park, doing something that's disruptive or makes you want them to leave, isn't there some other law under which you could, if they're
Correct,
setting a fire, if they're
Well, fire is
making
different,
loud
but-
noise or something, don't you have other?
So if it's loud noise, we have an ordinance for that, and we address it that way. If we see that there's an issue or a nuisance that's going on, and we don't have an ordinance for it, then we revert back to our state statute that allows us, because we have, again, because we have that We Care program, where we then tell them, you must leave, so we issue them a trespass warning. If they've been trespassed within the last 6 months, then it's an arrestable offense.
Are you saying that without the ordinance, we cannot post hours of operation?
Well, you don't have them. I mean, you can. I don't know. That would be something that.
So
maybe
can we inform people that the park closes at this time without this ordinance?
We can set,
We can't enforce it, meaning they wouldn't be breaking the law, however.
well, also
Because-
remember when, and I just want to address one thing, a violation of this is a violation of our code, so it would be a code violation. Now, it may elevate to an actual, more of a criminal violation if they were disobeying an officer's order or something.
But that would be not because of the ordinance, that would
That
be
would be
because
just
they're
because
breaking some other law.
that's correct. So what this would, so the answer to your first question is, yes, we can set, hours for our parks and make it clear. And a violation of that will be a code violation with a fine.
I'd like to understand more of the statistics of how many people are you actually, how has this become an issue? I mean, why is stargazing criminalized?
So
all of a
I think
sudden?
it's not the stargazing.
Well, but I mean, it
that's
sounds
the
like
issue.
we're over-regulating. That's how it feels to me. And I'm concerned we even extended to the beach. And I don't necessarily think that people should be subject to that for a couple of people that are just making noise that you guys can easily manage. And all of a sudden to throw out a blanket regulation for people not to go to parks, and then eventually we'll be talking about not going to the beach. I just don't think that that's something conducive to our lifestyle in Key Biscayne.
So Councilmember Lance, to answer a couple of your questions. First, this isn't talking about the beach.
But eventually we'll be talking.
No, actually the beach is
We're
covered by.
we're inching our way into issues like that. I just don't, I mean, I live here for a reason. If not, I'll move somewhere else. I don't want to be told where to be at what time, unless I'm making noise, unless I'm disrupting somebody. But if it's very few people that are doing this, and all of a sudden we're just prohibiting every resident from doing it, I just think that's just a little bit, too much.
We understand,
That's
but
totally
let me finish what I was saying before. First, this isn't about the beach. It's just about our parks. And in fact, the county already has an ordinance that
Well,
shuts
let
the
them
beach
have
down.
the ordinance. I don't want it here.
But it's a county, it's controlled by the county.
Whatever.
Secondly, a lot of times when our police officers show up, the people who are there aren't actually in the act of doing whatever it is that people call us for. So many times, this is a tool that'll allow us to remove them for, they're not necessarily setting a fire when the police are there. Someone calls them to say they're setting a fire. They aren't necessarily making the noise when the police are there. They're called to be there. This gives us an opportunity to enforce and remove them from the park if they're causing a nuisance.
If
as
we
the
have,
deputy
even
chief
if we
says.
haven't seen them do nuisance, right?
You still have the authority to do that. You don't have to pass a regulation and pass a law for that. You can still do it. You have a law
No,
enforcement
you
group
can't.
that can actually do it, well, whatever.
You have to see them doing it.
But the same thing goes with, okay. I'm not for it.
Look, I mean, I
Yeah,
clearly
I
understand it, and I
support
think,
that.
you know, we want to make sure that our residents can do what they want, but at the same time, we have a number of complaints all the time.
How
about-
many? I'd like to see the complaints, Mr. Manager, really would.
I could get you
I'm
numbers,
sure
I
we'd
don't
be-
have them on me right
be-
now, but.
Show me the numbers.
Okay. We could do that.
Okay,
Yeah.
go ahead.
I don't know what complaints you guys get, but I get these complaints that people are doing things within our parks, whether it's Hampton Park or whether it's the beach park. We get complaints about noise all the time. We get complaints about dogs on the beach. And we're not talking about the beach, we're talking about our parks. So there's a big difference between the beach and our parks.
I just think this is regulation for regulation's sake. I'm not for it. I think we should be concentrating on speeding, should be concentrating on other things that are far more dangerous for our community than,
But don't dismiss the frequency of noise complaints. They happen, I think, regularly, and with good reason. Is one of the problems in enforcement the decibel level that's established?
Not so much, no. I mean, if noise is noise and we get it from 100 feet, then.
But to the manager's practical point a moment ago, if someone calls and complains about a noisy condition in Beach Park, and when you get there, there's no noise.
There's no problem then.
Then there's no problem, right?
Except
that
the
they're
problem occurred, and it likely will occur again after the police remove themselves.
Correct. So we'll ask them to leave.
But you were saying that you don't have a predicate to do so unless we adopt this.
Except you said there's a state law that says under CARES or something.
Yeah, the
you
We
can
Care
ask them to-
program, so that allows us to step in and ask them to leave.
It has authority already. So
If
why do we need
you,
more?
what's the predicate there? If you perceive a nuisance, is that how that works?
What, yeah, correct. If we think it's a nuisance, if there's an issue that we see, that we witness, and we're allowed to then tell them to leave the area. I think the problem that we're getting into is that we're trying to define the hours when you're not supposed to be in that park.
And you're distinguishing parks from lit parks because
I'm sorry?
Right.
you're distinguishing parks from parks with lighting.
And from the beach.
And from the
Nothing to
Right,
do with
it's
the beach.
separate from the beach.
This only says unlit parks. It says.
And open
only
spaces.
unlit parks.
So the examples are in neighborhoods. It's Hampton, it's Harbor, and it's the beach park.
To me, this is about safer parks. Everything else is immaterial.
What's open spaces?
If you have something set up, and any open space that belongs to the village. I'm trying to think of one.
Somebody's walking down the sidewalk, that would be an open space.
No.
No.
That's not.
The Sarah Morris,
It-
the
it
Sarah
would be a-
Morris Plaza is an example.
Yeah, that would be, if there's people hanging out over the bodegas and it's past a certain time.
Okay.
Okay,
There needs to be a public hearing.
didn't I do it already?
No.
Okay, public hearing is open. Are you wanting to talk about this issue?
This issue? Okay.
Yeah. Get in line. No, you don't. It's a public hearing. You can come forward.
Adriana Spitale, 1121 Crandon Boulevard, F205. Hello? Hello? Okay. The thing is, maybe with some more police presence on the beaches, they can resolve that instead of limiting the people to go to the beach anytime they want. If the police are there, instead of doing maybe something else, talking each other in the cars, maybe if the presence of the police would be in the beach more often or back and forward, people can be quiet and enjoy the beach and the stars and the moon and themselves. That's the only thing I want to say.
Thank you for your comment. Let's make sure, Chad, this has nothing to do with the beach, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Next.
My name's Steve Travis, live at 550 Ocean, which happens to be right across the street from the beach park. I recently invested a lot of money to live in Key Biscayne, and I live across the street from the beach park. So what I just heard is, if I go to smoke a cigar at 10 o'clock at night at the beach park, sit in one of those beautiful Adirondack chairs that I use every day, that are part of my tax dollars, I'll get fined. I appreciate that. That's what I heard. Am I wrong? No. You guys are going to vote for that?
Well, discretion.
You could be fined.
Discretion, but when I go in there, I'm a law-abiding citizen. I'm going to follow the signs. It says do not enter. I'm not going to go in. It says do not enter. Okay? So, right? I'm a law-abiding citizen. There's a sign. Park is closed. Why? I have a key fob. I pay my taxes. I'm going to sit in a chair. I'm going to smoke a cigar. I'm breaking the law. If you guys vote for that, I made a mistake.
Thank you. Anybody else come forward? Public hearing is closed. Discussion, further discussion?
That gentleman makes a compelling argument. I personally would like to go reflect on that over a cigar. I think this has come out more binary and hard and fast than we thought it might when we conceived this. And I think a little more drawing board time might benefit a better result, including a fuller understanding of what exactly is the problem. I know noise is a problem.
Yep. And anything else that can happen inside a park, like Hampton. Hampton, I get complaints from about Hampton all the time about kids being in there late in the evening.
Yeah,
So,
that's right.
I think a motion to defer would be in order, since it doesn't seem like it's going anywhere here. Maybe it needs a lot more work.
I think a little bit more thinking would be good.
I move to defer.
Do I have a second?
All those in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Okay.
The next item is the first reading, an ordinance of the Village of Key Biscayne, Florida, amending Section 1-2, Rules of Construction and Definitions, to create a definition for the term publication and comprehensively amending and revising the Village Code of Ordinances to allow village advertisements and legal notices to be published in any manner permitted under Florida law, providing for severability, providing for codification, providing for conflicts, and providing for an effective date.
Move.
Second.
Thank you.
Okay, item is here before us on first reading. Discussion?
The only, I think this is an excellent thing for us to do. When I got into the nitty-gritty, the reliance on the county's site caused me to think that we ought to use our own website. And if it's not clearly enough in here, I think it ought to be, because people are in the habit of looking at our website.
Sure. So the way that state law was adopted, you have to use the county's website. So each county is establishing this, and so there's a centralized notice area. They have a link that, we can obviously publish and let everybody know. We do have an agreement with the county already to use that site. Now, this doesn't prohibit us from still publishing, by the way.
No, we need to use the county, I get that, but I think we should also use our own.
Oh, for sure. I think that the
There would
clerk
be a
will
link
continue to do that.
on our
Will
website.
continue to post on our website and distribute, in her typical, how you distribute electronically, the different advertisements and everything.
So in the new definition in Chapter 1, I would just suggest that we add that in, that we will redundantly utilize our own website as well.
May I have a clarifying question? As it was explained to me that there would be a link and we could go on our website and then for public notices, you would click the link and it would go to the county's website. So it would be accessible.
The whole thrust of, we're now defining in a new definition what publish means. And we're not speaking to what you just said in that definition, and I think it'd be better if we did.
Mr. Attorney?
I think, look, this is first reading. We can make it clear that we will provide the link. I do think, though, for purposes of meeting the statutory requirements, Councilmember Kaplan, it should be defined that link might be for courtesy, because the county website will meet the statutory requirements.
Courtesy or convenience, they're not quite the same thing, but.
Either way. But I think that's fine. We take the comment and we can come back for second reading with a suggestion for you if it's the will of the council.
That's all I got.
Okay. On first reading.
I believe there needs to be a public hearing on this item.
Yes, it does, because since it's technicality, we are amending our zoning code by doing this, because we reference a lot of advertising, so yes. We do
Okay.
need to have it.
Public hearing is now open on the ordinance. Seeing no one come forward, public hearing is closed.
Mayor, just one thing. I think it's important for the clerk to note, this will have a tremendous cost savings also for the village.
Yes.
And I know that's something that her department's been working through, and it'll help her, so.
Very good. Okay, call the roll.
On the ordinance as amended in first reading. Councilmember Vasquez.
Yes.
Mayor Roscoe.
Yes.
Councilmember Bracken.
Yes.
Councilmember Kaplan.
Yes.
Councilmember London. Vice Mayor Sardinius. Councilmember Stoner.
Yes.
The ordinance is approved on first reading as amended. The next item is an ordinance on first reading, an ordinance of the Village of Key Biscayne, Florida, amending Section 5-4 Standards for Maintenance and Appearance of Property upon which construction or demolition is being performed of the Village Code of Ordinances, providing for severability, providing for codification, providing for conflicts, and providing for an effective date.
Move.
Second.
Thank you.
Okay, item is properly before us on first reading. Questions or comments? I have one. Here on the where it says the perimeter fence. Chad? And it says, however, in no instance shall the swimming pool be left unsecured. Can we add something here that says, because we've had this problem before, and it kind of goes with, some of the issues that we heard from Mr. Godinez today, the pool must be clean?
So if I may, we do have other sections of the code that require that, and we do regularly enforce on pool cleanliness. And
But I've been around the key, walking from door to door, and I've had that situation come forward where someone says, you know, the site was, you know, abandoned, the contractor skipped town, or the owner doesn't have money to go forward, and the pool is sitting there and it's green, and, you know. Can we add to this section here, something like that?
yeah, I'm just saying we have it in other sections of the code already. So we have the requirement, and as soon as we know about those things, we act on them, and we have the authority to act on them already.
You do have the authority to act
Yes.
on them.
Yeah, that's true. It's considered, it'd also be considered an unsafe structure if it does get that nasty, that it can go through the county process and go through that unsafe structures process.
Yeah, but that can take a lot longer.
That's a long time.
I would suggest that we bring back on second reading, Jeremy will come forward with our other provisions and show you, and if you feel that those aren't strong enough, then we can add language in here.
Okay.
That's a good idea.
Yes.
So here's my contribution. It's the duration of construction problem, and we see this happen. The fence becomes in a relative state of disrepair.
Yep.
So how about the inclusion of a well-maintained fence? There are examples where, you know, construction is abandoned, there's a transition in ownership, and a property sits idle for a very long time, and the fence is all but falling over.
Or the screen gets whipped up and it's completely unsightly. Okay, can we address that?
Yep.
Okay.
I did find the code section regarding swimming pools, by the way, if you're interested. But we have, it's in section 5-3, and it says swimming pools and spas shall be maintained so the water remains free and clear of algae, insects, fish, amphibians, pollutants, debris. And they may be, and then
So if the
it also
neighbor
gives us,
complains, you can go in there.
we can address it. We typically call the owner and tell them, you know, take care of this within 24 hours, and then in other cases, we've addressed it.
Okay.
Jeremy, is there anything to do in this ordinance? Can we constrain the time of construction?
So we cannot constrain time of construction per state law. As long as somebody is maintaining an active permit, they're allowed to keep working.
So to address this gentleman who came up earlier, who has a 10-year construction site next door, and it seems to be delay. There's nothing we can do under our current situation as long as they have an active permit?
As far as I know, no. And that is a constraint from state law.
I think there are, and this is not the right place to do it. This is really just talking about fences.
Right.
We're going to have that, and later when we talk about potential legislation for 2025, that is one of the topics that we're going to discuss. It is challenging, as Jeremy says. We might be able to come up with certain check-in periods that might be able to allow us to go in at certain times and you know, ensure that they're meeting the right standard.
That's fine.
So that's a different place, and we need to address it. But this is
This is just the
specific
fence.
about
Got it.
fence. Yes.
Yep.
Jeremy, I was building a house in Manalapan past year, and basically, Manalapan, Palm Beach County, and they have a code there which says you have to build it within X amount of years. I think it was 2 or 3 years period. But then the permit expires. The council has the chance to, I think, renew it once or twice, after which point you must have a new permit. And you're saying that's against state law, Chad?
The difference is that, I mean, they might have adopted a local amendment to the Florida Building Code to be able to do that. Here in Miami-Dade County, we are restrained because Miami-Dade County has preempted us. And the way to accomplish what you're suggesting would be to go to the county commission, ask them to adopt a similar standard.
So they would have to have the standard also. They couldn't just let us have the standard?
They could do that too, but they would have, Miami-Dade County has to adopt the actual local amendment to the Florida Building Code because they have preempted all cities on building matters.
They adopt the code for us,
They
for themselves.
Yeah, they could do it one of two ways. They could adopt a standard that would apply countywide, or they could provide for discretion to allow us to adopt a standard or more restrictive standard.
So is there anything stopping us from deciding what we want to do and go to them and see if they'll approve it?
No, there's nothing stopping that. We have talked about that, and that is something that the manager and I are planning to discuss further. When this came up last time, I think it was shortly, it was before the holidays, and then
I think it was August, to be honest.
okay. When this came up last time, I recall we were waiting, I don't know if it was to wait for the election to see who our county commissioner was, or if it was before the holidays, but that is something that we have as part of our discussion items with the county, and we can talk with the mayor also.
But I think first of all, we have to decide amongst ourselves, do we want to have a limited number of years to a building permit?
I think
Before
the
we go to
answer is-
anybody else?
The answer is we do.
That's the question.
We do.
Is that a consensus on that?
Yeah, but that's part of the ask.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, I mean, we can't unfortunately do it ourselves.
I understand.
The case in City of Miami that made the newspapers so conspicuously, the delay, ultimately ended because of insolvency. It wasn't because, the developer tripped the clock. Is that right?
Yeah, I believe that case either ended in insolvency or in litigation, but it wasn't because they, I don't think they did trip the clock. I'm not positive of that. I mean, go ahead, maybe you know it better.
If you're speaking about the townhomes in Coconut Grove, yeah, so in that case, he actually manipulated the CO process by intentionally not closing out projects so that they were not inhabited, they were not inhabitable, even though they were very, very, very close to being completed. So that was, he was intentionally manipulating the process to make it where they were not ever a completed construction site. Or they stayed as a construction site and not an inhabitable home. So, yeah, the process can be manipulated. On the other side, though, if somebody is struggling to complete a project and there are additional hurdles for them to get there, it can also cause delays and sort of have a double-edged sword or unintentional consequence.
I also think there was a receiver appointed who then proceeded to close everything out and then finally sell those units.
Yes.
I guess what I'm trying to get at, my understanding was that people complained a lot, but the city of Miami had no tool.
I think that's correct.
Okay, we're on ordinance 9E. Call the roll.
Are we bringing this back to be amended or?
It's first reading.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, just to clarify, yes, we are going to bring back a provision regarding the fence being properly maintained, as Councilmember Kaplan recommended. I think that Jeremy read the standard on the pools. Is that was acceptable?
Can we put that in parentheses or something as a reference?
Reference back to the
Cross-reference.
section in 5.3, fine, we can do that, or 5-3, that's fine. Those were the two changes
that
that
it?
I had.
That's it.
Anybody else have something?
Nope.
Okay.
Mayor Roscoe,
Yes.
Councilmember Bracken,
Yes.
Councilmember Kaplan,
Yes.
Councilmember London,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Sardinius,
Yes.
Councilmember Stoner,
Yes.
Councilmember Vasquez.
Yes.
The ordinance is approved on first reading as amended. The next item is a resolution of the Village Council of the Village of Key Biscayne, Florida, approving a variance request to vary the sum of side yard setback requirements by 3 feet and 3 inches for the property located at 920 Mariner Drive, providing for findings, providing for severability, providing for recording, and providing for an effective date.
Move. Second.
Thank you.
Mayor, this is a quasi-judicial hearing, so anyone who's planning to speak on this item will need to be sworn in. So if you're going to speak on this item, please stand at this point and the clerk will swear you in.
Do you swear and affirm that the testimony you are giving this evening is the truth? Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Director?
Good evening. So the matter before you regards how we measure the allowable height, the allowable width of a building on a site. So in certain cases, you're really just limited by your setbacks. But in larger lots, it's actually a percentage of the overall lot width. And in this case, you have, and you know, this is sort of imagined as a fairly normal rectilinear lot. And in this case, this lot, for lack of a better term, has a bit of a panhandle that sticks off on one side. It's very, very narrow. It's not what you would call usable space. It's sort of an artifact that this is a lot that faces a canal on one side, and so little bit of the property sort of runs parallel between the road and the canal. So what they're asking for is for that piece of the sort of panhandle to be excluded, so that they can calculate their width as if this were a more typical lot. And I think it's, you know, this is in my opinion sort of the very reason why you have a variance in the code. Because you could never write a zoning ordinance that could account for every single circumstance on every single property. For instance, something like this, where, you know, how would you compose the code to exclude cases where, you know, the lot is less than 10 feet wide or deep or something along those lines. So because we can't account for everything in the legal language, we have a variance process where we can account for it. And I think in this case, it's an overall discrepancy of something around 3 feet of additional width on the home, which is significant. You know, when you're laying out a space, that's the width of a bathroom or utility closet or mechanical spaces. So it is very meaningful architecturally. It's still a very reasonable setback on the canal side which is where they're sort of reducing the setback. So I think it's a very reasonable variance request, and recommend approval.
Questions?
Jeremy, are you requiring to get a sign off from the neighbors on this?
No, not in this case. There's no sign off. For when we have an administrative variance, which is something that I can approve for things that are built sort of after the fact, that's when we have a process for getting sign off. This sort of serves for that. And then I think the applicant also has presentation as well.
Okay.
So the resulting yard is still 30, almost a little over 34 feet.
I'm going to take your word for it because I don't have the drawing in front of me at the moment. The side lot on well, it depends on if you count that portion of the sort of panhandle or not, in deciding the total width of their setback from the canal is reduced, I believe, 3 feet 2 inches from what it might be otherwise. But if you included that, you know, the panhandle in that width, then it wouldn't even be a reduction there, so.
Okay.
So in achieving your measurement of the front boundary, that's going to be determined by the intersection with what appears to be the north boundary, just continuing in the straight line?
No, you actually draw it as a diagonal between the street fronting property line and the back property line in order to calculate the width.
That lops off, if I understand you correctly, that lops off a lot more
Well,
of the front boundary.
No, then I'm misspeaking. So when you include the panhandle,
Right.
you have to sort of draw a diagonal, and that's where
Okay.
you take that
Okay.
average to
Okay,
calculate
I see it,
the
I
width.
see it. Mhm.
When you exclude it, it just sort of straightens it out.
It's a flatter angle.
Yeah, I mean, it's a more typical lot.
Right.
And I think they have illustrations
I see it.
to further describe that.
Okay.
Yeah, and if interested from presentation from the applicant.
Thank you.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. My name is Mario Garcia Serra with offices at 600 Brickell Avenue. Here today representing the property owner and applicant, MEL Trustees LLC. We have a relatively short presentation, but I think it'll help answer some of the questions. If I'm going too long, by all means, tell me. We can speed it up if necessary. So MEL Trustees LLC is the trustee for the land trust which owns the property, and the ultimate beneficiaries of that land trust are Nick and Natalie Estrella. We are joined tonight by Nick. Him and Natalie are longtime Key Biscayners who are raising their sons here. And the home which we are discussing tonight is their new dream home. We're also joined by George Hernandez, our project architect, as well as Bobby Behar from my office, and Paula Mendez from George's office. Here is the property that we are discussing. As Jeremy mentioned, it is a uniquely shaped and configured property. As you could tell, highlighted in yellow there in the survey is a sort of panhandle sliver that extends out from the property. And that is the detail of the property that's causing certain unintended consequences because of certain code provisions which are exerted here. As you can see, setbacks in this zoning district there's required a 7.5 foot minimum setback, and then the sum of both side yards has to be 30% of the average lot width. But in no case does a side yard need to be more than 30 feet. So if you look at the average lot width definition, it's the average of the width of the lot at the front and rear property lines. So you could tell by looking at the configuration of the property, if we're treating that panhandle as part of the frontage, it creates a much larger frontage than in reality what there is for the building site. The building site is really, for all intents and purposes, the property without the sliver or the panhandle. So this, hopefully it comes up pretty well on your screen, is sort of a graphic showing what we're proposing. And that's that our average lot width be measured by A and C. A being the rear, C being the front, which is the property without the sliver. The sliver as opposed to A and B, which is the property with the sliver. The difference there is that the total side yards using our proposed calculation is 34 feet 10 inches as opposed to 38 feet 1 inch, which would factor in the sliver. If you look at this one, this is what would be required if you are including the sliver. 7.5 feet on the south side and then 30 feet on the north side. And this is what we're proposing. On the south side, where we're actually closer to the neighboring property, we're proposing to increase it a bit. Instead of 7.5 feet, it's 8 feet 3 inches. And then on the north side, instead of the 30 feet, it's 26 feet 7 inches. But when you factor in a waterway that's also abutting that side of 55 feet in width, I think it certainly provides sufficient setback from the neighboring property and is consistent with the variance requirement that it be consistent with the intent of the code as well as compatible with the surrounding neighborhood. So we have more plans and so forth that we can show you of the home, and George is prepared to speak about that. You tell me if you want to see how the home is actually designed.
Just curious to know how that ended up there.
That sliver,
Yeah.
I suspect it's a relic of when the canal was excavated. In other words, you know, the property probably went over where the canal is right now. The canal was excavated. The sliver coincides with the connection that Mariner Drive has with Island Drive. So I think it's a leftover of when the waterway was excavated.
It wouldn't be a violation.
Excuse me?
Without the sliver,
Correct.
they'd be complying.
Correct.
And the northbound neighbor is across the canal?
The waterway. Yep.
Okay.
On Island Drive, yeah.
Let's go.
Okay, let me open public hearing on this item. Public hearing is open. Seeing no one come forward, public hearing is now closed. Resolution is before us.
All those in,
Has been moved and seconded?
yes, yes,
Yes?
yes.
Okay.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The next item is a resolution of the Village Council of the Village of Key Biscayne, Florida, approving and accepting a drainage easement agreement with VDM 2014 Irrevocable Trust relating to the property located at 490 West Matheson Drive and 1 Harbor Point, providing for implementation and providing for an effective date.
So moved. Second.
On the resolution, gentlemen?
Yeah, so, Mr. Mayor, and I'll bring up both the BZP Director and our Chief Resilience Officer, but first I want to set the stage. So we had this opportunity that came before us. It is 1 Harbor Point and 490 West Matheson Drive. After consideration of possibly using the property in and around the helipad, the property owner came back to us and said he would be willing to provide us property, access to his property to do an easement for a stormwater outfall. So we have since had negotiation discussions with him, and I'll let both Jeremy and Rowan talk through those discussions.
Yeah, so in summary, I think everybody knows with the stormwater project, and any future stormwater project, the last piece of the chain is what we do with the water. And in all of these cases, we're looking at having some kind of discharge capacity to the bay. The village has a number of existing outfalls that we rely on currently. We need to supplement those outfalls. So this is an opportunity to get access to the waterfront through someone who's graciously offered some of the existing property. I'd say this is uniquely suited compared to a typical lot because of the nature of these lots where they have a portion on the bayfront and a portion on in the Hurricane Harbor. So in this case, the main developable site is opposite from where these easements are. So it interferes with potential development rights or anything that would sort of devalue a property much less than anything else could potentially happen, where you'd be, potentially dealing with setbacks or anything else. This is really suitable in that it's in an area where it's only a very thin sliver between an existing easement where there's a road. For their neighbors, it's a private driveway. But it is an existing easement, so they can't do anything there. And we can take advantage of that existing easement for running our pipe and then get access to the harbor there. So it's a great opportunity. It's something that's been offered and that and we've done the preliminary work speaking to the county permitting agencies who would ultimately need to sign off on this to test the feasibility of it, and they did say yes, this is a feasible use, and that it's because it's not interfering with mangroves or anything else, and the surrounding waters are actually relatively deep. So any chance of interference with any endangered species or any protected areas is minimized.
Go ahead.
Thank you. Is this the one we were talking about the other day about being a dock and putting the pipe under it, or?
That's correct.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's
Okay.
correct. Yeah.
I think that merits some discussion on that because I was intrigued by that particular design. I think I don't know if, as you were speaking it, I want everybody to get the picture of what we're talking
So I
about.
can describe that. So
Sure.
in this case, you have a waterfront that is primarily mangroves.
Right.
So and there usually is a seawall behind the mangroves in these areas. but it would be potentially difficult to get permitting to integrate the dissipator structures, which is like sort of, I describe it as like a shower head, where the water comes out much more gently as opposed to coming out like a jet. There might be permitting issues with that passing through mangroves. And in this case, because those same issues exist for anybody trying to operate a boat, everyone has docks that project through the mangroves and then come to either like a T or an L, or typically, although in this case, one of them just goes straight out. So rather than integrate the dissipator structure into the seawall, which is things we've looked at in other cases, in this case, we're basically going to build a structure below the footprint of the existing dock, and it'll come out into the harbor, and then we can actually use both sides of the structure to slow the water down and discharge into the
Okay, so but you're not expanding the dock, you're not creating an additional footprint, you're using the existing piles of the dock?
Well,
No, it's
we would
likely-
rebuild
it's
the
likely gonna be
structure.
Rebuilt, but it's gonna exist.
Well,
within
you're,
the exact footprint of the
the
dock.
exact
And so,
footprint, I mean, to say.
and
that's what I mean to say,
importantly,
yeah.
yeah, and to your point, that this means that's an area that's already permitted for construction.
Got it.
They've allowed construction there. They count on it being shaded out in case there was seagrass or any of the other sort of conflicts. Like those issues are just handled because we'll be within the existing footprint.
That was for the benefit of council and everybody, because I
Yeah.
just want to make sure
Thank
they
you.
knew it. And I personally thought it was a pretty cool design, but that's
cool
just my thought.
It's novel. It's interesting.
It's a novel, yeah.
Okay, you want a couple of comments on the text? Because I got a couple.
Then we won't be spared.
On the easement itself, a couple suggestions. In the granting section, I would include village employees among the identified types of persons that are able to access. But more to substance, in 4, is the word reasonably, should that be unreasonably interfere?
Yes.
I got you on that one.
And then I would think in 5, the word lawful should precede activities. And my main question is really marrying the last sentence in 5 with our responsibility to maintain and improve and so forth in 7. In other words, if the property owner is able to replace the dock, there go our dissipators. And if he's doing substantive work on the dock, and we have an obligation to maintain, repair, restore, et cetera, how do those two principles reconcile?
Chad?
On the first two comments, I don't have any objection to those. I think they're fine. On the last one, I mean, clearly, we could maybe further specify in this sentence that any of this should not impede our dissipators or drainage structures.
Yeah, I don't want to, I think it's fine and reasonable, just, I don't think it works as written because we've got two conflicting scenarios potentially.
And this was a sentence that was specifically inserted by the owner's council. And we can go back to them and raise the issue of the potential conflict between the two sentences. That's fine.
I think that'll be, I have no problem with the intent. I don't think the words came out right.
Okay.
That's it.
Mike?
Chad, is there any situation where we would not be able to enforce this the elevator usage issue? That's we're basically trading for this variance?
So the helipad use is the reverter only kicks in if we adopt an ordinance or a resolution. So we control it. So, we would have to take an affirmative action to adopt an ordinance or a resolution allowing the helipad or helicopter use. That would then kick in the cure period, and then potentially revert the easement back. So we really control this. We made it also clear that it's only the village taking action. That's why an ordinance or resolution by the village, because who knows what the state could do. We feel comfortable that, and again, this was a provision that the owner specifically requested and wanted.
So if the state approved a helicopter pad there, would not nullify our agreement?
That's correct.
Or to use the hypothetical that we used a few years ago, if a particular property owner happened to become president of the United States and had the right to use the helipad, that's not our action.
That's a supremacy clause.
Right.
Yes. That's correct.
Okay. Any other comments or changes? Do we need to amend the resolution, Chad, or?
No, the resolution allows us to to adopt this in substantially the form. I have the two comments, and I will be speaking with the owner's counsel. There, here Mario does represent the owner and his partner Dan. So we'll speak with them about that last sentence in section 5.
Okay.
I've heard they're very reasonable to work with.
So consensus of council on the amendments.
Yes.
So on the resolution as amended, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Okay. Let's go to 11B.
Unique Abilities Advisory Board, Education Advisory Board, and Art in Public Places Board appointments.
Okay, we're gonna defer the Art and Public Places Board. The liaison has to do a little bit of work on that, and we'll bring it back in February.
Okay.
On the Education Advisory Board.
Mr. Cano.
Excuse me?
Mr. Cano.
Yeah, I thought I had already appointed him, but I guess we needed to do it formally.
That's right. We deferred it to this meeting.
Pedro Cano, and that takes care of the EAB. On the Unique Abilities Advisory Board, did I give you a name or not, Jocelyn?
You didn't give me a name, no, sir.
Okay, my bad.
We have how many seats available? How many seats are open still there?
I think there's one.
I think there's
Just one?
Yeah, yeah. All right, my bad. Can you bring that up for next meeting, and I will make that
in
appointment.
February, yes.
Yes.
And consensus to confirm Mr. Pedro Condo to the EAB?
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes. Okay, Mr. Bracken.
Yes, sir.
The next item, a motion to formally separate the electric undergrounding project from the stormwater system project.
Well, we discussed this in our workshop. I would like to see it, that we take the bid documents, the drawing sets, and the project schedule out of the stormwater process so that we have two definitive projects running simultaneously. So that we can continue in the event that the stormwater project goes on hold or gets set, whatever happens to it, we can continue moving the undergrounding process forward. And I'm looking for confirmation from council to do that.
So that I'm clear, you're talking about Zone 1/Phase 1?
Zone one of the undergrounding process, yes, sir.
Okay.
So the intent is, if something were to happen to change the timeline of stormwater, we don't want to be behind the 8 ball on power.
Correct.
We are. It is being designed in a separate layer, so we have the ability to pull it out if necessary. Obviously, we want to make sure that it's being looked at as a whole so that there are no conflicts right now. So, Roland, you want to hop up here just to confirm that, in fact, that it is, we can actually separate it and pull it out as a separate layer? I'm assuming we can, but you've seen the plans more than I have.
I mean, we could move forward with undergrounding.
No, I'm not talking about that. But he's asking for, is there a specific layer of the design that we could pull out and we could procure that separately? Not talking about execution, just being able to.
I mean, what do you mean by a layer of the design?
A layer where they're doing the design inside of the AECOM's design.
Can they remove the layer, the AutoCAD layer and say, electrical, let's take it out and let's just show the stormwater right now?
And put it.
I mean, I suppose conceivably you could. I'd have to talk to them as to whether or not that's something we'd really actually want to do, but.
No, I'm just asking if you can.
I mean, you can turn layers in CAD on and off all over the place. That doesn't
Guys,
necessarily.
I understand how the drawing system works.
okay.
What I'm asking for is a formal process that allows us to bid this project separately, okay, so that we have the ability to move this project forward, i.e. the undergrounding, without the stormwater.
We could do that if it's something the council would want to do.
Yeah.
Now, I mean, there's two steps to it. One is, I think your first question is, can we do it? The answer is yes.
Correct. Okay.
I think the next question is that something we want to do?
Well, I think that
There's two parts to it.
what we spoke about the other day was, let's get to the end of the process, and if that's the case where stormwater is put on hold, that automatically it keeps going, and there's no stoppage to it.
I mean, there are aspects of the undergrounding design that may have to be rejiggered, because, I mean, if you're not moving forward with the pump station, for instance. And
into the microphone?
if you're not moving forward with the pump station and other stormwater features that require power that's coming from undergrounding, those aspects of the design would probably have to be redone.
No. I understand that. No, I think they're just asking, he's just asking the question, can it be done? And I think the answer is yes. And how it's going to be done would be.
I mean, I'll confirm with AECOM, and then we have to confirm with FPL and stuff like that.
I don't think we're making the decision about doing it. He's asking the question, can it be done, if that decision is made?
Yes.
Sure, please.
Yeah. Well, I've always expressed the concern that I've always had about doing two digs separately is, and I've stated this before, and I think a couple of people stepped up and spoke about this, was the fact of doing the highest utility, which is the electrical, which only has about a 3-foot depth, do that first. Because that not only has a different vertical alignment, meaning that the depth, but also has a different horizontal alignment. So by putting that first, then we have to put a big pipe below that that's got a snake around it, because once we put it in there, we own it. And the contractor is going to nick it. And once they nick it, then it's going to come back to us. So I'm saying we have to be very careful. It's not that it cannot be done. It's not that it cannot be done, because it's been done before. And in times it's better to do it separately, because sometimes FPNL or AT&T and the other utilities may be slower. My question is, can we separate them, but put another area as a priority as opposed to put it in alignment
That's
with
the
the pipe?
conversation we had last week. And in fact, we've already done that, council member. I've already.
If we're going to separate, I'm all for, doing the electrical first. But what I'm not all for is doing the electrical first in place where we're going to put a trench later on.
Correct. No,
Does
and
that make sense?
what we discussed last Friday is that
all right.
we could move into phase 2, which is basically the northern part of the village, which in fact also corresponds with where we have the least reliability.
But bear in mind that once we laid out that system, we own it, and then the contractor there's going to be a line item in that contract that the contractor's going to say, hey, listen, man, I touched that, I lay out that pipe, and I heard that, you own it.
No, you're absolutely right. And the more stuff
that's
we
all.
end
I'm
up,
just
the
giving
more
a word of
stuff we
caution.
end up putting in the ground in advance of doing all the big work on stormwater, the more complicated
the
the
biggest,
construction
Gentlemen,
work,
slowest, and the
complicated
dirtiest
the
work
construction
is really
is
the
gonna
big
get.
Just to intercede for a second, I mean, if we look at this as two separate functions, okay, AECOM can actually design this most likely so that one set of easements is going down one side of the street, potentially, and one set of easements is going down the other side of the street. They don't have to be constantly crossing each
Yeah,
other.
no, they're already doing that, but invariably there are conflicts that come
Of
up
course there's gonna
all
be
over the
conflicts,
place.
yes. There will be
So
conflicts.
it's very it's easy to keep it that black and white, to say it's that black and white. But when you look at the drawings, and I've looked at them a lot, there's a lot of stuff in the ground, and there's a lot of conflicts all over the place.
As Roland, as we all know, that the as-built, that's what's there is not what's reality.
Yeah, so
Again, most of this is going to be directionally drilled, I would imagine, as we've heard before, so.
All I'm saying is that from a constructability point of view, the more stuff we put in the ground in advance of doing the big infrastructure work that's going to be needed with the stormwater system, the harder it's going to get, the more conflicts there are going to be, and the more chances there are of damaging things that we put in the ground in advance of the stormwater.
So in other words, Steve, if we would decide to move forward with phase 2 of the undergrounding program, staying with phase 1 at the current design, we can still.
As we talked on Friday, and I thought that's the direction that we were considering, because I've already given them direction to go to FPL and start to begin a general idea of the planning and estimate for that. I would recommend that we can continue on with the northern part, phase 2. It addresses the most unreliable portion of our system. We're not at the point that we're not deciding to do stormwater right now, so let's move forward to that as a project. If we get there, we'll see. We could pull it out, but that would be a part of the process. But my recommendation is let's not break it apart now. Let's go after phase 2.
My experience with this type of installation and construction is that the underground electric goes in the swale area. The storm sewers are going to go in the street area, unless this is something different or unusual. But that's a normal method of doing it. So you're familiar with also, Fernando.
Yeah, but that's
It's
not
not
the
that
conflict
clean,
I'm talking about. I'm talking about the horizontal. Okay, so it's.
I understand, but
you got the pipe here and you got the other one here, but this one's going to cross.
But
You got to get.
The other point is this, that basically the inlets are at the edge of the street, not in the swale area in most places, correct? So basically the electric is in the swale area, not in the street area where you're putting in your storm sewer. So you're saying, okay, so you can have a lateral crossing the trunk line or something like that. Is that what you're talking
Yeah,
about?
the catch basins.
But the catch basins are all on the perimeter of, excuse me, the edge of the paved area, not in the swale area.
But listen, I'm saying, these catch basins are very big structures,
I
very
understand.
big, okay? So the moment they have to excavate for that, it's not, they have to make room for it. They have to build a
understand.
big area so the
I understand
contractor
all
can lay out the structure. I don't know exactly where that conduit is going to be. So I can't say right now whether it's not going to have an impact or not. All that I can tell you is that the risk escalates if you do that first.
No argument.
That's all I'm
Yeah,
saying.
and bear in
But I'm
mind,
saying it's minimal.
bear in mind, there are also water lines and sewer lines.
Yeah, but that's
So
the
there's
size
a
of
lot, there's a lot of underground utility that's jammed into the right of way from property line to property line. So so
Well,
again,
that's there anyway. I mean, so that's just complicating the project.
yeah, it's there, it's there.
That's there anyway.
Yeah, it's there anyway, but it just, it
But in
just,
some cases, we're actually going to have to move it
you
as
have to
well.
move water
Oh, yeah.
lines and
So
sewer
that's part of
lines
the
in order
stormwater
to.
design is actually moving
Yeah.
Sure.
some of the water and sewer. So going back to Councilmember London, yes, conceptually what you're saying is true, but again, as Councilmember Vasquez says, it's never that clean. And there's going to be crossing.
I'm
and
agreeing
that's-
with you that.
Yeah, it's never clean. So I think there's risks to that. And as we spoke on Friday, I think what we do is we go after phase 2. Let us move forward with that.
That makes sense.
Come back with an estimate, and we get a cost estimate, an initial cost estimate, and if that's what you want to move forward, we'll move forward and design with that.
Okay.
I think we need to move forward with the electrical. I agree, we want to move forward quickly with the electrical, but I don't recommend if we should do it separate.
I thought that we had decided that we were going to, at least with respect to speaking to FPL, move forward on the northwest
Phase
section.
2, yeah.
Phase 2, correct.
Anyway, we're
Yes.
doing,
Yes.
Yes.
okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I gave the direction to the team on, was it Friday or Monday, whatever, Mike, whatever it was. Monday, I think.
which I think is good from your perspective, because that's your priority. So under any circumstances, electric is going to go forward, right? Somehow, somewhere, and the truth of the matter is that's the most important
Yeah.
part for electric anyway.
And we don't face the risks of conflicting utilities.
Makes sense to
No,
me.
I mean, we don't face them up front. We'll potentially face them down the road when we
Concur.
If the village ever gets around to doing stormwater in
But
that
that's
area,
way
then
down the line in terms of the stormwater phases. As we discussed during the campaign, that section is way down, is a high number or something. It's not the ninth phase, but it's
Well, we don't know
whatever.
yet. No, we haven't evaluated that, but.
anything
Well,
beyond zone.
numerically, it's a different.
It's not going to be done at the same time, but as I mentioned also on Friday, is we will have to design it with the idea of putting stormwater in mind. So we will have to be cognizant that at some point, stormwater systems
Right.
will come in.
Right, well,
I have
that
a-
makes sense.
If I may, Mr. Mayor, a quick question. Who's writing our contract? Who's developing our contract for construction? Is Black and Beach doing
Black
that?
and Beach and us, yes.
Are you guys, are you or you're not? Okay, you are, okay. Are you taking out note on all this stuff?
Yeah.
Okay, important, because we want to have a tight contract. At the end of the day, we can talk about anything we want in here, but if we don't have a tight contract, and that's where we're going to get hurt.
So, and I understand this is what basically we're looking into and what we've already looked into is the idea of work packages within the zone one, but also in phase one, and breaking out undergrounding as a separate work package. And also moving forward, we're getting updated estimates from FPL on phase two as well. We talked to them this morning. So we expect that within 2 weeks. So we should have updated numbers by the January 28th meeting.
And I also gave them the directive to start putting together their procurement writing team as well. So.
Okay, Mike, that
good.
takes care of your item?
Thank you.
Okay, good.
Yep.
The next item is law enforcement, Councilmember Stoner.
I just wanted to comment on the, let me get my notes here, on the, on our unfortunate incident this past week with the bomb threat. I want to commend, I'm so proud of our police department, the fire department, the manager, and the mayor for how this was handled. It was spectacular, it was efficient, it was decisive, and I think it was wonderful for our community to experience that. I spoke with our manager and I've spoken with our police chief to express one concern that I had moving forward, and that is we had, I don't really know exactly what happened. I know the K through 8 was on lockdown, and I think that was an advisement or a directive from the village. I don't know if any other, the Presbyterian was on they voluntarily locked down because they heard what was going on, and I don't know about the community.
Church also.
Okay, so my concern was that, and I started seeing on the chats that parents wanted to know what was going on. Their kids were in the school, and they didn't know what was going on. So everyone, including me and my son who has children in school here, goes into automatic panic mode when you hear about lockdown. So for communication goals going forward, I'm going to hope that we ask the manager to work with the police department and fire on crafting some policy of getting information out to the residents that if their school is on lockdown, perhaps it is just as a precautionary measure. So when you hear lockdown, you know there's not a shooter at that school because that's the first thing you think when you hear lockdown. So if you know it's just a precautionary measure, you may know there's some other problem somewhere, but that your children are not in immediate danger. And I think just having a policy of getting that information out there very quickly would be a kindness to all of our families.
Thank you, Councilwoman. And first, I want to thank you for the kind words. I also want to reinforce those because I was out of town, Chief Souza was out of town, our communications manager was out of town, so I really want to thank Chief Lang, wherever he is.
He's right there.
For what he did. But it also shows you, how quickly, whether we're 1,000 miles away, 300 miles away, 600 miles away, whatever we were, how we were able to communicate. We were immediately on the phone, able to make decisions, move in the right direction. I appreciate the police notifying the school. There is one thing about the school. Once it goes into the school has its own protocols as well and how they communicate. I did have an opportunity to talk to Ms. Pena afterwards. We've got to be really careful about what we say about the school, and that is something we probably need to learn. but they become in charge of their communication. So that's a touchy subject. Now, when it comes to the community school, yeah, that's a little easier. They're not Miami-Dade County school system, but I think that's a lesson learned that we got to look at and really find out from the school district what we can and cannot say about the school.
Well, I think that a lot of parents were really scared
And
for
rightfully
a
so.
couple of hours. And then the phone lines were down, so it was panic mode for some people, unnecessarily. That's my.
It's like after any crisis or any natural disaster, we learn from it and we push forward, so.
Exactly.
You have one more item? or you-
Stormwater design.
Oh, I'm hoping that we could have a workshop before our next meeting. I don't know how that could, scheduling-wise, could happen,
There is a workshop on the 28th of
but I
January.
thought that was a council meeting. It's not a work,
It's a workshop. There's just one item that has to be included that is a time-sensitive item that has nothing to do with the stormwater issue.
okay. That's fine then.
Okay?
Next item, discussion on pausing
Oh, okay, yeah, go
the
ahead.
engineering contract for the stormwater system. Councilmember Ledger.
Basically, you all received my calculations, Excel spreadsheet. If my calculations are correct, hopefully they are, my son checked them. We are over-designing the system. Roland is shaking his head. He hasn't checked it yet, but he's sure they're wrong. Anyway, we're over-designing the system. We're not including, one thing for sure, they keep saying they're not including any pervious area. All water goes into the street, which is absolutely ridiculous. We talk about having pervious driveways, everything else, when our code says we want the water to stay on the ground. Our building code says you're supposed to retain the water on the property. I don't know where it's going to go. It's supposed to go in the street, but we're supposed to retain it on the property. But we're designing the system, the capacity, assuming everything is going on the street. So I've given you the numbers. You can check them out by on the 28th. Can discuss it further. I've also given you a letter, a history, et cetera, of where we are. I've also let everybody know that at this point in time, we've already paid Black and Beach $1,530,000 to help us, I guess, coordinate. And we paid ACOM $2.9 million. And at this point in time, I think Brett said, I forgot what he said, it was either $400,000 or $500,000 a month we're running up. So my point tonight is to pause for the 2 weeks until we go forward and decide, do we want to keep going on something that we don't need? Or do we want to keep, or do something different? And if you don't need it, why you keep paying money to Black and Beach and to ACOM? So that's where I am tonight.
I have a quick
For a
question on
pause.
that, if I may.
Go ahead.
Mr. Brecken, I thought you were. Look, I'm all for efficiency, and I'm all for doing things the right way, and I'm all for not spending any money if we don't have to. I want to state that clearly, but I'm also for not getting ourselves into trouble for doing things like that. And what I want to make sure, and I think for the next meeting is probably good, more for the manager and the attorney to really find out what the legal repercussions are, if there are any, and pausing the design or committed timelines, any liabilities, any potential, I'm not sure, I'm not going to state if they are or not, but sometimes these engineering contracts that are signed have clauses for delays, have clauses for potential breaches, because we don't know how, I guess the question is, how long are we going to delay it for? Are we going to delay it for a month?
Well,
Are
I'm
we
saying
gonna
delay it
for
until
6 months?
the 28th, at which point we then decide, do you want to go forward or resume
Okay,
the
but that's
contract?
like, think of a factory. You got things moving, all of a sudden you stop the machines, and then all of a sudden
I
you start
understand that.
again. So what I'm saying is that I'm all for efficiency, and I'm all for making sure that we don't spend money, but I think we need to really have a clear understanding of that contract. Should we put a pause on it, I guess we need to have a clear understanding for how long, because, these companies have, knowing them, a consultant myself, all of a sudden, they start assigning people somewhere else. They got to charge on the hours. They burn hours. So if we do that, they're going to reassign. So let's understand it. I mean, I'm not saying we should not. I'm open for it. There's been a lot of discussion about it. There's been a lot of concerns that we're spending a lot of money. There's a lot of further analysis that may need to be done. But let's clearly understand what we're doing and not get ourselves into trouble. Not really shoot ourselves in the foot on it. That's all I'm asking. The attorneys, I think, can understand a little better what I'm saying, if there's any contractual issues.
Ed, would you be willing to look at reallocating the engineering to focus on phase 2 of the undergrounding process during this 2-week period
Sure.
versus stopping them, just reallocating?
Yeah.
That won't make any sense. I
No?
mean, they can't turn. I mean, it's 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Look, I mean, I just want to be clear. You know, the administration is moving forward on a 5-2 vote of the council to come forward with the design. We told you we're going to come to 60%. We're going to give you a presentation on January 28th. We need the Black and Veatch team and AECOM team to provide that presentation. You shut them off now, you're not going to get the presentation that you need to make decisions. So let's move forward, give this presentation, then you all can make a decision as to whether you want to move forward. But to turn these guys off for 2 weeks to have them go do something else, that's not going to happen.
But you made a 5-2 vote without giving us the knowledge that they were not going to consider percolation of the soil, that all the water was going into the street.
Council member, we've been having this conversation for close to 3 years, and I appreciate this work that you've done, but you haven't spent the amount of time that our AECOM engineers have spent.
So well,
and I'm sure it's very good.
Maybe I work quicker.
And I think you do, but you don't move as quick with all the information.
I'm
that
not
they have.
billing by the hour, so I'm trying to get it done.
Can you let us know by January 28th what the contract provisions are regarding
Certainly.
pausing?
Yeah.
That theirs and Black and Veatch, just so we know where we are?
Certainly.
And verify my numbers.
Frank, you wanted to say something?
Sort of not, but I feel like I.
It would be Frank if he didn't.
We knew 3 years ago that this was going to be difficult practically, difficult engineering-wise, difficult budget-wise, and difficult politically. And we were right, it is, all of those things. I don't want to pause this at this point for a 2-week hiatus. I don't think I've heard anything new that we haven't discussed repeatedly, with one exception. And it's the night that the gentleman from AECOM, who typically presents, seemed to be suffering from something like the bubonic plague, and spoke about this percolation point. What I heard that night, I don't think is the same thing that you've concluded from that presentation. And I'd like to ask and answer that question specifically, because it is a sensible thing to plunge into. If your supposition is correct, and the drainage that's required leading to this capacity decision is inflated by more volume of water that is likely to wind up in the system because of percolation, notwithstanding, his name is Tom.
Yeah.
Yes. Notwithstanding Tom's prognostication that percolation is going to become less and less and less viable as groundwater rises and rises. So that was very clearly baked into everything I've ever heard that resulted in the capacity debate. So I think I'd like to get to the bottom of that question. But the presupposition that we just pause because we're going to reach that conclusion anyway is premature in my mind. And the notion of we need an independent study, study what? What are we going to study if we don't have, a product to then ultimately vet? But also asterisk, we've been studying all of this for years. And we keep circling back to pretty much the same conclusions. I think the decision tree was actually very intelligent, that bore fruit of a certain capacity, a certain volumetric capacity, and ability to iterate as needs arise later in time, so we see what we really need by way of additional pumping. But, starting with the notion that if the underground system isn't sizable enough, we won't be able to deal with that volumetric need once we determine that we need to. That seemed very smart to me.
Well, basically, I discussed this with Roland, and because I was told that they were considering only 75 feet of the 100-foot depth going into the street. And I said, I thought they're considering the full 100 feet. Would you check it out? And he came back and he said I was correct. They're assuming all the water is going into the street. So I didn't make this up.
I'm not saying that you made it up. It was a confusing and surprising moment in a long iteration of very complex facts. You heard something, I didn't hear the same thing, but I'd like to get to the bottom of that question.
And you can also look at the volume of the water in the street, the calculations, and see, assuming the rain fell on the entire island, you can see that they have it going into the street by the numbers and the elevation of the inches of water.
So as a physical reality, that doesn't happen. If in 40 years, the worst predictions are exceeded, the question is, will that happen?
I don't have all the worst predictions by Black and Veatch.
By the way, one other question to prepare for 2 weeks from now. A couple of weeks ago, I think it was the UN Climate Compact comes out with the climatological report for 2024. It was the worst year ever recorded in the history of geology and earth science. And it exceeded by a surprising quantum the previous worst year, which was 2023. And I wondered what that experience, back-to-back years of surprising degradation in conditions, worsening conditions climatologically, mean in terms of the NOAA intermediate model that the entire world is following. Is that a reliable benchmark of where we're going in 25 and 30?
That's not the model the UN is following.
You know, there's a couple of things that I think are still out there hanging on the, what we call the cone of uncertainty, I guess, and that's the whole debate about sea level rise. That's still, in my opinion, that's still out there, and the curves that we're getting, it's with the information that we have right now. That's why we have to establish, 20, 25-year horizons for these systems.
Sure.
And keep on improving them as we move along. But I think one thing that does merit some particular discussion and better understanding are some of these South Florida Water Management District curves that they established, some of these statistical curves that were set back in the 60s and in the 70s, in my opinion, warrant a serious revision. I've stated this before. I've stated in numerous situations that I am concerned that engineers throughout the industry continue to use these curves, these hydrographs, or these potential established decades ago. And I don't think that dialogue, to my knowledge, and I hope, that really that dialogue has been really delved deeper to understand exactly how we are affected. It's a scientific discussion, but you know what? Everybody's running with it. Oh, they're the South Florida Water Management curves, 10-year, 24-hour storm event. I think if anything, we can hone into that. I think that warrants a discussion with the South Florida Water Management District and to really understand how those curves can be actually applied.
I went to a briefing that was led by, I believe her name is Dr. Hurtado, with either the Water Management District or with Broward County.
Chief
I'm not
Broward,
sure.
Chief Resilience Officer.
Yeah.
They were struggling, and the purpose of this meeting had to do with the canals in Broward. And basically, my understanding from that meeting was that Water Management in Broward and Dade have updated the models that I think you're referring to and are working from what they consider to be reliable prognosticators, based on current conditions, not generations ago conditions. But it'd be worth checking on that as well.
But we continue to use the same 10-hour, 10-day, 10-year, 24-hour, et cetera. I don't know. I think that there has to be a real serious dialogue about that.
Councilmember, are you suggesting that they are under-predicting, over-predicting? Because if you recall, we chose to use it, we saw it as being 8 inches, and then we took a step down and said we would accept 7.5 inches.
I've always felt that the statistical distribution of those curves and how they're set, I like to understand them better, how they're being applied. Are they being applied because it varies all throughout. I think back in June 2009, there was a huge storm event in the beach. There was 14 inches. At the airport, there was only 1 inch. And I'm not sure whether we're able to capture exactly and model that exactly to fit with today's science to get a better understanding of the rainfall distributions. I think we're still using concepts and science applied back from ages back. And if that's been done, well, I need to understand, I'd like to understand that a little more. I really haven't designed a pipe in quite a while.
I
but-
probably have the statistics that, because I got a slide deck on that presentation from.
Okay, well, let's understand it, because that's really the essence of it. We're talking about volume of rainfall. So where is that coming from? How is that being derived? What's the benchmark that we're using? And is the benchmark aligned with today's science and
So
our
the-
understanding?
I'll see what I got.
Okay, so let's continue this on January 28th.
Last thing, Fernando, I included in what I did was, and you all have in your packet, the last 32 years, which I got from Dr. Samimi, of the incident of intensities of rainfall. And then I have the other one from NOAA from Miami Beach, and I couldn't find Key Biscayne, which basically deals with the frequency of rain, the average rainfall, and the only 3 months of the year where you'd even have 7.5 or more were in, let's say, May, August, and September. The other 9 months, you don't even approach that. So you could never even get to the 7.5 inches. Again, and look at the intensities, and look how far it falls off on the 1 3/4 to 2 inch intensity versus the low intensities. So when you look at the probability of those things happening, again, it's based on the past. You can say, well, things are going to change radically, but they have to change really radically to make any difference. And again, we didn't have that information before we decided, at least I didn't have it before I agreed not to vote over the 2 inch system.
They call them the London curves.
Well, no, it's not mine. I got it from Samimi and from,
All right.
from NOAA.
Okay. Thank you. To be continued. There's some discussion items that I think are worthy of us spending a little bit of time on right now that the manager's outlined.
I had all the information there.
Let's see. Which are the bigger ones that you want to give us a little bit of background? And
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, I think the first one, and I think this is, we've had a number of discussions tonight about the legislation that we are considering for 2025. I would suggest we go through that. There are a number of ordinances.
Okay, explain the legislation, internal legislation that we need.
Our legislation, yes.
To address some of the issues that we have with sea level rise and resiliency?
It's resilience, it's development, it's residents, it's neighborhood solutions.
Okay.
It's all the
Okay, can we-
legislation. Why don't we jump through that?
Succinctly go to through those to see?
Yes, if you would go to the fold-out, the multicolored, do we have that? Can I pull it up? Okay, so one of the things that, I've recognized over the last couple of years is that we piecemeal legislation.
Is the what?
We piecemeal legislation.
Okay.
And a lot of times, they're coming up and, we don't really know what the intent is. It's one piece of a puzzle in a larger, one piece in a larger puzzle. So what I tried to do here, and I tried to do it in colors, as well as titles. You can see, REAP 1, REAP 2. Try to package legislation in ways that we can look at things holistically.
Right. And by the way, I think as we heard tonight, that some of the things that we need to get done, whether it be the BFE or whether it be impervious or pervious materials and all those kind of things, are things that are independent of the other things that we're working in resiliency, right? That they are part of a bigger picture of things that are not necessarily stormwater or undergrounding.
No, but they do have an impact on them. They're all part of the same conversation.
Of course,
and so I think a lot of times that we do speak about them independently, when in reality we should be talking about them as a whole solution to what we're trying to achieve. We may not get to a final answer on it, but at least when we understand what we're trying to do, and I'll use a perfect example. Let's take a look at it. You can see the first 6, right-of-way harmonization and utility connections, very specifically related.
Can you explain to folks what the harmonization is?
So Jeremy, you want to do a quick overview on harmonization?
Yeah, I can jump in on that. So basically, it's if you have a street that needs to be adjusted, the edge of the street needs to be adjusted as part of a stormwater management, even if you're just improving gravity-fed systems, you're going to affect the elevation of the street, and that's going to intersect with people's driveways, and how do you harmonize that? And that also goes for utility connections and everything that's sort of in that intersection between private space and public space.
Okay.
Is this up for discussion, Mayor?
We're really trying to talk
Yeah, so
overall.
let me
strategy.
step
Yeah.
back to a bigger picture. We started jumping in real quickly. I want to give a big picture of what this is first, and then we'll narrow in into each individual legislation. So we broke it down into 3 categories, with the first one being resilience, a second one being smart development, and the third one residential, and then we just happen to have some miscellaneous ones at the end. And then we grouped them in packages that we can bring forward at certain times throughout the years, so that, again, we're looking at legislation holistically and not creating piecemeal approaches, and we don't know how we're getting there. So that's the big picture. So obviously the first one, resilience, the second one, smart development, the third one is residential issues. It's a lot of legislation, probably more than we want or can do in 1 year. So we also prioritize it if you take a look at the left side. But I want to get the council's opinion as to which ones we want to tackle in the year ahead. We've also put recommended dates in there as well in the second column. I think that is third column. So again, these are areas, and even one of the things that the gentleman talked to tonight, we have one down. It's in the yellow, dormant residential construction sites. I think we talked about a couple other ones. Swale management, that seems to come up a number of times. But I like to take a look at holistically whether this is something we want to tackle as a council and administration, and then how do we want to do it in terms of packages.
It occurs to me as a kind of working methodology and to pick up on work from 2024 and prior, there are some things that I think we're going to want to do in the zoning realm, touching on planning, that cut across much of this, or touch on a lot of this.
And I think you got that catch-all in there, Jeremy. It's,
So we do have,
the update commercial district form.
Yeah, we do have one that's regarding updating commercial districts as well.
I mean, the point about permeability, number one, number two, freeboard.
Right. Yeah, we have those.
And all those are in there.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
we're going to want to do this work this year.
Yeah, so just to go through it, right, we got the harmonization that Jeremy just talked about, the connections when it comes to, how we connect with both electrical and telecommunication. Next one, council member, is freeboard, building heights, site elevation, allow higher bulkheads. Those would probably be packaged together because they all kind of fit together. The next two there are focusing on waste, and those are our single-use plastics in government buildings. That's probably an easy, low-hanging fruit that we could do. A recycling ordinance, how do we want to address how and what we want to recycle? Two other ones are energy-based, EV parking, solar ready. And then the last package there is more resilient infrastructure. That's where you see your impervious materials, and also taking a look at county flood criteria, and do we want to adopt any of those into our ordinances?
Maybe it'd be helpful if I just suggest what I would think to exclude on a superficial first look. The vision plan part that had to do with reimagining the commercial district, to me is, off in the future somewhere, and not a core preoccupation in 2025. If along the way good ideas germinate as they tend to do, great. But I wouldn't think to focus as a policy priority on that scope of work.
Agree.
Okay.
So you're talking about comprehensive plan update?
No,
Where
this
are you?
It's the last one in green. Yeah, I think that's what you're referring to,
Oh, the
Councilman?
update, okay.
you know, a lot of the yellows are really just ancillary to what we're going to be doing as a core preoccupation all year. I think so, same with the reds.
And our intent is, you know, a lot of times we do stuff where we might do one ordinance in February, March, another time we might do it in, you know, August, September. They don't seem to make sense. You know, how are we piecing this together? In reality, all four of those pieces of legislation probably work together.
Yep.
So how do we actually bring them forward together? Because it makes more sense that way.
Well, methodology, again, I think it was helpful in 2024 to do the breakout work to help council as a body deal with things more efficiently and, you know, more evolved thinking.
And if we want to put that process in place, we can put something similar in place as well, that we can preview these things before they actually come to council.
You know, I was just thinking about that, and this might be Mr. Bracken, who is the liaison with the sustainability group, is maybe you get, you know, one or two people from that group plus him and you guys and go through ones that apply there. But I think that way we could come back to the council with a little bit, you know, like, okay, we've looked at all these and we think this is important, this is more important, and give us some feedback.
And most of,
and that's what, Frank, what you were talking about, what you and Brett did with some of those zoning ordinances.
Yeah, the preview process, right. And if you look at the new priorities, they are primarily resilience related.
Yeah.
They're energy related too, but that also is under the purview of the SAB.
Yeah.
They're also waste related, also under the purview of the SAB.
Why don't you guys work on that and see, you know, is it 2 people, is it 3 people? I don't know, you know, whatever you all come up with.
I mean, I think probably the best is one. I think probably one with Councilmember Bracken and Councilmember Kaplan. I think that's, you know, I think one can represent, I mean, obviously that's the council member's decision, but.
So if I may, I think the idea of using the existing Sustainability Advisory Board to review some of these things on the sort of on the way here probably makes sense for some of them. And also keep in mind the good old-fashioned public meeting for anything we would be doing that's affecting really what we think homes are going to look like in the future, which all these things have implications for that we're talking about. We would absolutely take those through a public meeting process. And also something that we've done previously as well is work with the chamber. So for instance, we really want feedback from developers, architects, even if it's not necessarily aligned with what we think the village's goals are. They're the main users and the main people impacted by any changes to those codes. So it's really good to get their direct input and encourage them to participate in a public forum as well when we're changing zoning ordinances. So we can get a lot done through those public meetings.
Do we have a zoning advisory board?
No.
Is there a reason why we
Yeah,
don't?
I think traditionally we've always felt that the decision can be made here and not have an intermediary that slows down the process, and that we were small enough that this group can do it.
Three times, however, that's true. That's the case. But 3 times a committee was formed to study and advise. But it comes back to council.
Right, for the ultimate decision, but we have so many architects who are involved in the community that could give us some insight into the consequences of some of these things. And I feel.
Well, I think we've also had, God, I can't think of the name now, the Zork.
That's what
Zork.
Councilmember Kaplan was talking about.
But in this case, I think these are fairly targeted. You know, I
Right,
have
but
direct relationships
you
with
were
a lot of
addressing
those
something
folks.
different, not about
Right,
this, right?
Right.
But I do
More in a
think
general sense.
handling it through a public meeting process where we're bringing it's not a general public meeting, but you're saying, hey, look, these are targeted legislative items or zoning code changes that we're talking about, that you can get that same impact through
My
a
point
public
only
meeting.
is
Yeah.
that, not being an architect, architects may be able to inform us of
Yes.
unintended consequences or,
They
and
do.
items,
Yeah.
consequences we don't even haven't
And that's
considered.
exactly why I want to make sure they're included in the process. Yeah,
And that's happened all the time. The last time we got together on, I think it was the FAR incentives, every architect that ever participated in the Zorks was there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, let's keep going.
So what we'll do is I'll sit down with Jeremy. We'll take the look at this list, use the priorities, come back with the recommendation. If we want to add the intermediate process, which it sounds like we do, we'll have to move some of the stuff to the right, because we'll have to put that review process in place. So let me come back with a recommendation. I'll send it out to you.
Right, but you're gonna do that with Mike Breck.
The intermediate process, but coming back with updating this. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, and so that we can put that intermediate process in place. the review
Just a suggestion, when you get into the zoning planning part, you're going to miss me. I think I'd better participate.
I thought you were on the team.
I should be, and I would like to be. So,
And Mike wants you.
All right, you just have to zone, sunshine the meetings.
yeah.
Yeah, and we've done that in the past. And if we have any more than one member of the SAB, we'll have to do the same, so. yeah.
Okay,
Some of these will have to move relatively quickly, like the harmonization and the connections. They'll have to move because we have to decide whether they're going to be ordinances or whether they're going to be policies. And I don't know if we have time tonight, but I would like to at least have an opportunity for us to present to you what the idea is, whether you all want to have a discussion or not. We can save that for another time. But those are important discussions that we need to have as we continue forward with the design. All right-of-ways to private property, primarily driveways, but there's more to it in some cases than driveways.
just as a small tangent, I see the CRS thing in here. Is
Yes.
that, am I looking at that right?
Second to the bottom.
Yeah, second to the
Pink.
bottom in red,
Yeah.
and that's,
Um,
Jeremy, you can fill in.
We've run into a lot of different communities, and their number is a lot lower than ours. Do we know what's going on, or?
Yes. Yeah, so we're actually working with the state right now to get our number lowered. We think,
Just so people can follow, we're at 8 and we want to go to 6, and that lowers your flood premium by 15%, right?
by an additional 10%. It's
10%.
5% per point. We do have sort of a theoretical floor here because we don't have green open space and we don't have some of the things, some ways to achieve a lower score. But currently we have essentially everything in place to be at a 6, pending a couple of properties that the state has questions about that we need to resolve. So
Okay.
we are very much actively working on resolving that. And there was recently a lot of turnover at the State Floodplain Management Office that sort of set us back.
Okay.
But this, as an ordinance right here, would be, if we choose to go to the next level, if we choose to go to a 5, which is about probably where we can end up,
That's probably our floor, yeah.
that would be any modifications we need to do to the zoning code in order to help us get there. That's why this is an item on here.
Okay. We got it all?
We're good?
Okay. You want to go to Rickenbacker Causeway?
I'd like to go to harmonization and connections, but if you want to go to Rickenbacker, we can do that first. But I would like an opportunity to have our team at least introduce the topic to you all tonight.
Okay, but let's do this before we lose focus.
Which one? Rickenbacker?
Rickenbacker, yeah.
Okay, if we would go to.
Is that on presentation?
Yeah, it's further on.
Okay.
oh, you just, so let me introduce this here. So, since August of 2022, and you see the slide in front of you, I think it's slide 22. As we've been working with the county and other stakeholders, but primarily the county, I have been using these 7 set of priorities and goals as how we work to ensure the village gets what we want to do. You know, primarily it's the free flow of traffic is the first one, and not just for our traffic, but also for the ability for our emergency services to go through. The other one is to improve the connections and access to the intersections on Virginia Key. So again, it reduces traffic, but also provides better MOTs during events. And then thirdly, which are the top 3, the most important ones, are separating bicycle traffic, pedestrian traffic from vehicle traffic. The other ones are important, but not as important. Those have been the top 3 that we've been pushing. Very descriptive in manner, making sure that we hold other people accountable, that their plans meet these standards. There has been a movement afoot, and there is a presentation from the county, and we talked about this last Friday. I'm working with them to set that up early February. But there are also some other ideas that are percolating as well. So my question here is, do we want to be more prescriptive on what we're asking for, or do we want to stay more at the broader goals and priority level, so that you all can give me the guidance that I need when we go out there and I can say this is what the village wants?
Yeah, do we want to be more prescriptive after we've seen the presentations? And I think that might be, but go ahead, Frank.
2 things. I'd like to know where the county's head is at and what they think is on the front of the table right now, because I'm not in touch with it. And
so you've probably been following kind of the process since I think it was mid-November when the original meeting was set. We had a second meeting to be set right before Thanksgiving, and then I think a third meeting was set sometime in early December, and that was kind of a back and forth between Public Works and the district commissioner as to when the time was right. It turned out that neither of the 3 were right. Things have moved forward. We're now working with both Public Works and the district commissioner for trying to get it in February. What's on there? It meets our goals to a certain degree. I wouldn't say 100%. I think it's lacking in areas. So even it's not even meeting the descriptive goals at this point. And I think, we've told them that. We've told them very clearly. So we certainly hope by the time they come back in February, they've made those adjustments. Anything you want to add to that, Jeremy, before we go forward?
No, I think that's a pretty good description. I'd say that, I would supplement and say they've been responsive to our input. But we also haven't seen the final version, so.
my instinct, which is really only an instinct, but it tells me that we ought to be a little bit more engaged earliest as possible and as often as possible to be more.
Well, we are. Jeremy and I we work with them every month, and more frequently as necessary. I think what hasn't happened, and I think it needs to happen, which is one of the reasons why we asked them to come forward and do a presentation. We need community input, and we need council input, right? Because this is just me and Jeremy doing it right now. Yeah. We need to know what the community wants, and that's why we need the county to come down and present what it is.
And actually, I'd say we've been stuck in sort of a holding pattern for the last month and a half, 2 months, where we got to a point where we're like, no, we need to get this before the community. And it's just been a matter of scheduling and then everything from elections to holidays, and here we are. So I think we're moving towards getting to that date and that meeting.
Well, I think the mayor's point is a good one, and that is we need to see the various ideas, and then we can decide how much, if any, we want to be more prescriptive and or not. But
Well, there's
getting
one
those
element-
scheduled is the most important thing right now.
There's one element not on the list that's always on a list, and it's one of the hardest things, which is the influence in preventing commercialization and excessive use and Dolly World at Virginia Key. And that means City of Miami. And it's not on the list, but it's on my list. And I wouldn't want to give up on that goal,
Can we generously call that under create partnerships?
maybe.
Yeah, it's also integrate with concurrent planning efforts as well. I think that's the intent, without really calling anybody out. And we didn't want to do these and things, but that's what we follow. Anytime anything pops up that's new, right now we're still working. How's the boat ramp parking going to work? As the Miami Marine Stadium RFP, which still is in draft form, how's that going to look before it goes out? How do they expect the operator to operate that facility, and how are they going to take traffic into consideration? So that's what we mean. That's as far as anything at the City of Miami is thinking about planning.
I don't know whether the simple passage of time and reconfiguration on the dais is really an opportunity, but it might be. There's an improved representative body, in my opinion. And also the accidental encounter that we had at the Hobie Beach ribbon cutting with one of the county officials with whom we've had some difficulties was encouraging. So I feel like it's a good idea to maybe touch base with some people, including our district commissioner, so we don't get to, say, February and have a thudding disappointment that would otherwise be avoidable.
No, we're working with them. And I thought I was clear on that. We're definitely working. In fact, I've spoken to her chief of staff over the last 2 days, making sure what she sees. First, she doesn't believe the Public Works is ready yet, and when she believes it is, and I believe she's going to take a presentation from them first, then she'll go ahead and agree when the time is right. We're targeting right now the second week of February, and I'll continue to work with her office to get them down to give that presentation.
I guess my final point on the question, the very specific question, do we want to be more prescriptive? My instinct is yes, we do.
Yes,
because we have such good ideas. I mean, we do. So that's my vote.
And I think it's important because these have been the 7 that I've followed for the last, I guess it's now, over 2.5 years, and we'll do the same. If you all give us direction on what those more prescriptive directions are, Jeremy and I will make sure that whatever plan is being developed meets those standards. Or if it doesn't, if it falls off that standard, we come back and report it back to you.
Permeability of the vast ocean of parking that's almost never used.
Bridge.
Reduction of impervious material, roads.
Why should you care?
Concrete.
It doesn't work.
We need playing fields. Tennis centers basically mothballed. Calusa is not nice enough.
We got to make sure we don't conflate other things though for this. We got to stay very narrowly focused on the Rickenbacker and what it does. Obviously, those are other initiatives that we're working, but I want to make sure that we're staying very focused on the Rickenbacker and the corridor from the mainland all the way to the village entrance.
The Bayside is a visual. It's not actually utilizable as a park.
Right.
It's just a pretty scene as you're driving by at 40 miles an hour. A lot of ideas.
So what's the process? I think we've all decided we want to be more prescriptive. That was the question.
Right.
So what's the next step?
I think so. I think when we talked about this on Friday, I think the direction I understood that you all gave me is let's get with the county.
Yeah.
Let's have the county come down and do their presentation first, so we understand what they're doing. And then if there are any competing or other ideas that people want, they can then present them. And then we would do a workshop with the council. I think we would take the best of both 3, 4, 5 worlds, whatever it is, and then come back and say, this is what we believe are the top 5, 7, 8, whatever they are, goals that we want to achieve.
Great.
Steve, but their intent was to have a public meeting, correct? With
Workshop.
the county was going to have a public workshop.
The first 2 would be public, and then the council would be there, take that information in, and if necessary, we'd have those 2 entities come in and do maybe a very detailed presentation or maybe just a roundtable with the council to come up with the best way to go.
Okay. I think we're straight on that. Harmonization?
Two more down.
There we go.
So set the condition why this is important. If you would, Jeremy, please.
So any right-of-way improvements that we do, anything associated with the drainage project, or really any other circumstance where we're working on the right-of-way, a good for instance of this is a lot of our right-of-way has a very, very small crown, very low slope between the crown of the road and the edges of the road. So if we're going to be changing any of those, we really should have clear direction on what happens if we create a misalignment between an existing driveway connection and our right-of-way. There is something of a gray area that happens it's very clear at the edge of the private property line that belongs to the private property owner. It's usually very, very clear where the edge of pavement is, that's 100% the village's responsibility. But there is the swale area that the private homeowner is allowed to alter and maintain. The driveway apron, which is what connects that that imaginary line of the property line to the edge of pavement, that our ordinance requires them to maintain the same materials that they have in their driveway. But it's technically in the right-of-way. So how we handle the harmonization of any changes in our edge of pavement and the private property is something we need to address. And that is the sum total of the harmonization. So it's about creating standards where we haven't necessarily had them before, creating process when we are changing it. So that's what the harmonization deals with. It's very closely tied to harmonization of utilities as well. As we go to utility undergrounding.
Can I interject real quick? Yeah. And I'm not sure if I heard you say this or not. One of the unique things we have in our ordinance is that we actually require homeowners to extend their materials in their driveway out to the roadway. And so that's an important portion that we have to take in consideration as we turn around and talk about harmonization. If we're already asking them to spend money in our right-of-way, and then we're going to come in and take it out, what are those decisions? What's that policy we want to put in place? Do we want to make them put it back? Do we put it back? Do we not put it back? Do we turn it into concrete? All those sort of decisions that we need to come up. And then not only does it have...
Or do we change that?
Or do we change the ordinance? Right. And they have cost implications. Obviously, putting in concrete is a lot less expensive. Putting in specialized materials, much more expensive. Obviously, we'll try to save as much as we can, but you can't always save all the materials when you remove something. So
if you look at examples like maybe what they did for Sunsets 1 and 2 in the beach, places like where they have high-level residences where they had different driveway treatments. They had the contractor do what they call white glove service. They remove the bricks and they put it back. In other areas, sometimes they try to use a standard concrete approach.
Microphone, please speak into the microphone.
It's not on.
Sometimes they try to use a standard approach like concrete. But there's that component, there's the particular treatment, and there's also the differential in the elevation. Yeah. In some areas, you're going to be lower because you raise the roads. In some other areas, it's going to be easier to harmonize because you're going to be right above grade. In some other areas, you're going to be allowed to have a better swale because you're going to be a little higher and you're going to be able to create a better swale. Every area is going to be different. So I think in the concept of standardizing, my suggestion would be to work that out with the contractor from the standpoint of treatment. It's probably better because standardizing, we're not going to be able to formulate that here. It's impossible. It's going to create, the moment we say, well, we're going to just standardize it and make it we're going to give you concrete, you're going to have a whole bunch of residents out there complaining because their driveway is made out of stamped concrete or it's made out of bricks or it's made out of anything else. So
Our
my
goal-
suggestion will be to address it what I call white glove service. Address it individually by each driveway and work it that way and put it in the contract.
And how many years do you think before if we don't elevate the roads? I think the maximum you're gonna elevate, phase one is 12 inches, if I'm not mistaken. But if you don't elevate the roads because of the harmonization, how long before all the roads are underwater?
They already are underwater.
So, look, I'm not gonna, I don't know when the roads will be underwater. It depends on the road. But I wanna step back because it's not a elevation of roadways issue. We ran into this issue and addressed it on a very ad hoc basis when we improved the sidewalks around the school.
Safe routes to school.
The Safe Routes to School program, we replaced with concrete in that case. It was a decision based on, I think, mostly on getting a grant for the sidewalks. It wasn't like thought out in the same way that we're trying to do here. So,
Any key learnings from the immediate mitigation, flood mitigation that we just finished with regards to harmonization?
No, none of that
we didn't
interfered with any driveways.
Look, there's great examples on how this is handled in other municipalities. In some cases, you've got everything from in certain portions of the city of Miami, like in Coconut Grove, where they prescribe the materials you have to use in your right-of-way. And then at the same time, they also say, that's a non-standard right-of-way improvement, so you're responsible for maintaining it, even though it's also required in the code that you do that. Our code essentially would read that way now because we require you to use
An extension of what you already have.
an extension of what you already have, and we require pervious materials. Now, there's also an issue, pervious pavements don't function when they're on a slope. They function when they're on a level surface. So obviously aprons, driveway approaches usually have some kind of slope. So, do we need to adjust that as well? Or is it more about aesthetics and surface material? So there's a number of things this opens up. You can go all the way from that to where we require you to do certain elevated materials and not elevation in terms of quality, and we require you to pay for them, down to we're just going to put in concrete. So this is the policy decision we're trying to navigate.
Yeah, that's the policy part where Councilmember Vasquez was talking about, understanding the slope and how you're going to do it for each individual one. I agree. That's a contractor decision that only the contractor can do for each site. But the broader policy is, are we going to return what they've installed back to their standard, or are we going to just pave it over with concrete?
We're not gonna pave it over with concrete.
Isn't our new standard pervious?
That's a recipe for disaster.
I'm using an
No, it's
example,
not.
a
Concrete
cheaper,
isn't it?
a cheaper material.
Uniform, I think uniform is better. Concrete is diametrically opposed to everything we're talking about.
I'm talking not returning it back to the way they had it, which, yeah.
But uniform.
So the current, not the new, the current standard for driveways is pervious. What we've seen continue to get built where it's impervious, those are pre-existing permits that were approved prior to the change in code requiring pervious.
The lessons I learned from standardization and harmonization of driveways is that you make a lot of enemies if you standardize it.
Well,
Let me just be plain and honest, and we're not here to make it, we're not in this business to make it.
That's why we're having this conversation,
With our
because if you
residents.
tell
No, I
everybody
get it.
they're
No,
having the same thing, it's gonna be an issue.
Steve, what are we gonna do with elevation changes? So we're gonna be in a situation where you're gonna raise a driveway, and then you have a house that's got a lower driveway. Are we gonna put a speed bump in there to keep?
None of the, and that's why I brought rolling up, none of the current situations exist where, with the height that we have to raise it and the existing have any impact on it.
We're not raising the roads so much that we're creating a slope problem as we go from the roadway to the private property line.
But I imagine you're
AECOM's
thinking
already-
that, right?
Yeah, AECOM's
That's not
already
happening.
looked at all
Yes,
the
that.
driveway slopes. There's 400 and some odd driveway entry, whether it's two driveways for the one property or one driveway. They've already looked at all of those slopes, and none of them are exceeding like 10 or 12% slope relative to the amount that the roadway is being lifted. So slope is not gonna be is not necessarily gonna be a problem.
So Roland, just walk me through this. Crown of the road, you have an existing Mackle house with an existing driveway. okay,
Yes.
Which is basically flat, okay, relative to because if we raise the road, the water's gonna come down the road, it's gonna go into that guy's driveway.
You're saying you won't exceed
No, we'll-
12%?
Any of the sites.
That's where we'll put catch basins.
Yeah, so, but that's
so-
also not a condition in any of the sites that.
Yeah, we've looked at all the
we've looked at.
driveways, and that is not, that extreme case is not present in all of the houses.
What do you call extreme, over 12%?
12% is a
over-
really
yeah.
significant angle.
Over 12%.
So what do you say?
For-
the
for-
water's
for a
gonna drain,
driveway-
It's gonna go away?
It's gonna drain to the right of way, and it's gonna be captured by the stormwater system itself. Now, there is an element of harmonization that needs to be considered, which is not just apron materials, but in the event that a lot may incur inundation, then there should be a mechanism for that lot to then be able to tie into the system temporarily until such time that that lot is redeveloped and the lot can be elevated such that that no longer becomes a problem.
I
So
think
there-
that's the biggest, sorry, I think, sorry, go ahead, finish, but I want to say something.
So that is an element of harmonization that has to be considered and has been considered by other municipalities, and that's something that needs to be.
Yeah, but that
addressed
brings
as
up
well.
a bigger conversation, I think, is, just occurred to me. Are we currently in our design following the existing grade and putting catch basins based on the existing grade?
On the expected grade.
On the,
The
we're
grade of the
modifying
roadway.
the, I'm sorry?
Grade of the roadway you're talking about.
Yeah, the grade of the roadway, the finished grade of the roadway, are we following the existing grade? That will be the finished grade? Or are we
Yeah,
elevating?
The catch basin drains are being set relative to the grade that is gonna.
To the grade that is right now.
That is going to be.
That is going to be, so they are gonna raise the roadways a bit.
Yes, they are,
in certain
absolutely.
areas,
They are
okay.
going to rate, to varying degrees around zone one, they are going to be
Around-
raising the roadways.
Okay,
In
but,
most extreme cases, it'd be probably about 12 to 14 inches. In other instances, it's gonna be less.
right. Okay.
But yeah, they are gonna.
I thought we were
So-
discussing how much we were.
So what we can do, I think, there's a couple things though. I think 12, 14 inches is the crown of road.
Yeah, crown of road.
Crown of road. So that's
over
that's in
time,
the
that's
center.
not all at once either.
And then it slopes down.
it's gonna be at once.
We actually, AECom is working on the information for each and every individual driveway impacted by this.
Yes.
And we can, when we bring this, we'll provide the most extreme examples. And so you can see what we mean, because
So Jeremy, in
talking
these-
through this is tough.
In these discussions, drawings would be really super helpful. I mean, so for everybody in the room, as well as the people watching on TV, if we had a drawing that said, example, this,
Oh,
these
and-
things would
and-
make
and
life a whole lot
we're-
easier
we're
for
trying to
everybody, because we
present-
spend like 10 minutes versus 2
Yeah.
hours just talking about this.
I think that's a good point, because I think
Especially in a section and
we
and
can
plan
save
view.
some time in the discussion that
We will
way.
actually
Yeah.
have those examples for January 28th. They do
Perfect.
exist, yeah. So you'll be able to see.
Thank you.
And our intent tonight was really just to introduce the topic so that you're familiar with it, and then we'll spend more time on the 28th having the conversation.
And now we understand that uniform materials,
Well,
not
and-
uniformly
and-
loved.
Oh, and we've already sort of like costed that out. The difference is one is double than the other, but that's to be
Hey,
considered as well.
Just to go off on a little tangent, the conversation about the carport, what was that about?
Oh, if you don't mind, I'll come back to that when we get to the zoning
Okay.
items.
All right.
Yeah, I do want to come back to it though, because I think it's worth mentioning. So the next item we're talking about is utility connection responsibilities. This is definitely close to, and it has a lot of overlapping issues with harmonization. And this is really talking about who, the responsibility for that final connection between where we're going to be relocating transformers and points of connection to the households. So and that this applies not only to power, but also any disruption to sewer, to other utilities. So let me see.
So Jeremy, when we're doing the final connection of the electric, it looked like in your presentation, it was a one-time fee that was going to be borne by the homeowner.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the homeowner will be responsible
But why?
for making the
But
connection.
it would make, I mean, Chad and I talked about this on another conversation, that this would be something that generally could be financed through through FPL.
FPL has a process for this, so I happen to be familiar with this, working on a project for some in-laws where they're going to be converting from overhead power to underground. The utility pole that they connect to isn't changing. There is a plan down the road to potentially move the whole system underground, but right now it's just the feeder line between the existing easement, the FPNL easement, to their property. So it's really, in this case, it's a length of 60 feet. In similar cases, it's going to vary property by property, but that's what we're talking about. And this is something that private properties or owners are responsible for now. That connection from, if it's overhead, it's the connection that runs the power line that goes to the transformer, goes to the nearest pole. The private property owners are responsible for that. So FPNL has a mechanism that if you're undergrounding that section, that the costs borne by FPNL are sort of folded into your electrical bill for, I think it's a couple of years.
Yeah, 5 to 7 years.
5 to 7 years.
That's what we were talking about, right?
Yeah, but I think that's something that we do, and Steve and I talked about it earlier today, that we do need to speak with FPNL about, because what Jeremy described is a process that is permitted now under Florida law, but we need to speak to FPNL to make sure that's an eligible option for our residents.
Yes, yeah, and we will be, yes.
Because in some programs, FPNL does do it that way, but we need to make sure that in our program that they're going to allow for
And that's what Chad is saying is important, because there are about 4 or 5 different programs that FPL follows. Some that have already been sunsetted, some that are new, and I think one that we're referring to that Chad is enjoying in Pinecrest is a different approach than that we're doing. Is that true, Chad?
Yeah, I mean, that's the point. So in like Pinecrest, maybe in the Gables, they're part of the pilot program that FPNL has. So instead of the city doing it themselves, FPNL is doing it as part of a pilot program and then adding those costs onto the electric bill. Here, we're doing it ourselves, so the rules are a little bit different. So I think that's the key point, that our residents should be allowed to have the benefit that other cities or residents are having, and especially since we're fronting the funds.
Great.
So,
Okay.
What's next on the agenda? So next, we have driveway pervious materials and standards. I think it's worth noting the Village of Key Biscayne actually was ahead of the curve, well ahead of the curve, ahead of what the county was doing by requiring pervious driveways a couple of years ago. Now, the county has sort of gone a step forward, and they're incorporating all sorts of things about water quality and other issues. But what I would like to do with a change of ordinance is work with Weiss Serota and make sure we're in lockstep with the county ordinance, but also improve our current ordinance, which is slightly vague in certain cases. So right now, we only apply that standard to the single and two-family districts, where we do have most of the construction. But I'd actually like to move it out of that part of the code and move it into the definition, so that we have a clear definition of what pervious pavement really means. And if we want to, we can apply it to other zoning districts and apply it uniformly and consistently. The other thing I'd like to do is, as part of that definition, is to get a little bit more prescriptive on what pervious means, because right now we sort of invite some conflict with civil engineers who are trying to tell me that sandset pavers are pervious, even though they're not. Even though if you use the AI search engines, they'll tell you they are. but if you do a deeper dive on actually what pervious means, they are definitely not. So there's some conflict. If you look at, you know, peer-reviewed research, master spec type, you know, applications of.
But you didn't ask Ed? He knows everything.
Well, I know he does. I consider him a peer review, so I think he would understand that, yeah, sandset pavers are not actually pervious.
Jeremy, let me ask you a question on pervious. I mean, I know pervious works well when the groundwater is pretty deep, because obviously you created a potential head on it, and when the groundwater is pretty high, and the capillary effect, think about the water rising.
Yeah, so
Is that
So this is great. Pervious pavement can actually be beneficial to longevity of pavement when you have a high water table, because what happens when you don't is if you have a high water table and you have compacted that soil and you're relying on the mix of sand, gravel, rock, a high water table can actually start to erode the smaller particles out of your road base early, and then you get collapse of the pavement above. So having a system that's designed for water to move through it can actually improve longevity of those systems.
but it doesn't mean that it absorbs. Okay, but the purpose of pervious is not necessarily to, yeah, I guess it's for pavement is fine, but it is to make sure that the water.
The water to soak in.
We create a
Yeah,
pervious area.
and you're 100% correct. Pervious.
It's great from a structural perspective, but we're looking at a
Pervious
hydrology condition.
does not solve your drainage issues if you have a high water
Well, that's
table.
important that the public hears that.
Yeah,
because
I think it
thinks
is.
that because it's pervious, it's going to get the groundwater absorbed.
And there's two things.
It doesn't absorb groundwater?
I'm saying it works both ways.
It does. You don't get storage of stormwater from this. A pervious pavement system does nothing better or worse than a functioning French drain system.
Or grass.
Or grass. And if you have a high water table under the grass, the rainwater doesn't have any place to go. Now, I do think this is a good ordinance, and I do think it's worthwhile having it, because so many of our driveways, construction, new homes, when they're built, most of their hardscape area is on fill. So you do get potentially you can get some benefit of additional stormwater storage on the private properties from this. But you need to make sure that substrate isn't compacted. The second they compact it as if it were a normal building site or a normal driveway, there's no place for the water to go.
Jeremy, the real issue is the slope of the house. I mean, if the house is house is elevated relative to the road, and the driveway is on an angle, if there's no catch basins, and all the water's just sailing right down into the street.
That is the case, and that's why we usually require a trench drain at the property line as well. And a trench drain has an enormous capacity for catching water. It's literally like 30% void. It's as effective as a shower drain.
Who's maintaining the French drain?
This is a challenge.
That's where I wanted to get into this, because all this stuff is great, but if it's not maintained, it's useless.
You're 100% correct, and our ability to ensure that every pervious driveway is maintained to a high standard is very it's slim to none, to be frank.
Okay.
Now,
what is it? Is it the homeowner or is it the village responsible?
so it's really the homeowner, but the reality is if they don't maintain it, it has a downstream,
Adverse.
literally a downstream effect on the village as well.
Can't you get a third-party inspector to come have an ordinance written that says you, owner, are required to show that these things have been maintained and send in your paperwork?
Yeah, and I think that's actually consistent with some things in the county. There are percolation tests. Let me do a little research and check practicality. Is this something that's available
Couldn't
readily?
we just have a third party service provider
I
do it for everybody?
I
And require
know how we did percolation tests on new construction. But I didn't know, I don't know offhand, and I'm not saying they're not there. I need to do the research to see if this is a service that's available. We would literally show up with a water truck and turn it on and make sure the water went in.
No, I'm talking
Yeah.
more about maintenance. I'm talking about actually.
No, but
doing
that's how
maintenance.
you test the
Right, I understand,
permeability
but I'm
and to
talking
make
about
sure it's been,
maintenance. Yeah.
to make sure it's been maintained, that's how you test it. And that's the challenge with a permeable pavement as opposed to a conventional drain. Conventional drain, if it's not draining, you look at it, it's clogged, you
But I think-
unclog
but
it.
Let's go back to
Yeah.
this is an ordinance, right? This is
Right.
not the how-to. This is holding people accountable.
No,
So
but I want to make, but if we want to include something in the ordinance
Should
about
include some piece of
maintenance
maintenance,
and how to monitor,
and to what
we got to make
standard
sure
they
the
have to do it, right,
practicality,
exactly.
it's a practical way to
What
do
would
it.
the standard be? Is it, you gotta check it every 2 years, every 5 years, every?
You know, I'll check the industry best practices.
Okay.
My instinct is it's going to be closer to 5 than 2.
Okay.
Jeremy, our current code, as far as retaining water on the property when you build a property, is it necessary to retain your own water on your own property?
It is for as Councilmember Vasquez said, the standard is based on, I believe it's a 10-year. Oh, I don't want to get this wrong, but I think it's a 1 inch, it's 1 inch of water in 24 hours,
So
sort of
basically-
rate.
You think it's 1 inch, everything is graded accordingly. You have a grading plan you submitted with your building permit, correct?
Correct, and then
Which then shows you how the water is supposed to flow and how it's supposed to not go into the street, correct?
correct.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. And then, but only up to preserving that 1 inch in 24 hours. So it's saying, you know, we're a medium-sized storm, not
Is
a,
it 24 hours or is it a certain gradient that you have to have? In other
no,
words,
no,
on
the
grading
stormwater
plan,
retention's based on
It's
a,
actually based on the inches or is it based on the gradient you have to have, positive grade of extra gradient?
the grading is a function of the water retention amount. So, for instance, we have our particular zoning ordinance that says, you know, if you're elevating a site, you need a curb, like
Keep the water on the property.
really truly a curb that's well and beyond what the county requirement is. Because we're relying on the county requirement regarding the 1 inch in 24-hour storm. So the grading, all those other things are based on the design storm.
Jeremy, I have a quick question. I mean, the detail that I'm looking at here with the under drain, that's with the groundwater lower than that.
Correct.
'Cause
So
what exfiltrates shall also infiltrate.
right, and
So-
the under drain isn't necessarily required.
Right. Or
Those
vice versa,
under
I guess.
drains can make a sloped pervious system start to function because, you know, it can take the water out more quickly. But then also if you are in something in the water table and that under drain's not moving the water anywhere, then it's not required. That's part of an optional
I
portion.
honestly feel that, I think that exfiltration systems and under drain systems with a high groundwater table are kind of an exercise in futility, in my
Yeah, but again, this is definitely also tied to site elevation. And a lot of our, particularly the driveways and a lot of the hardscapes around pool decks,
But you
all
would have
those
to
areas
elevate the
are
site
elevated.
significantly to make sure that
Oh,
that
it-
under drain works.
But they are.
Otherwise, all that you'll cause is just a little depression on the groundwater contour. That's all you're gonna cause.
Yeah. No, but when we're talking about a new home construction, they might be elevating that site 3-4 feet.
Okay, well, I'm
Jeremy,
not, yeah,
what's
I have
the
my opinions on it.
elevation of the retaining wall on, keep the water in the property?
We have a
Above there.
requirement for, I believe it's a 6-inch curb.
6 inch, thank you.
Yeah.
That'll hold more than 1 inch, right?
Yes.
You are good at math. Real genius.
So I want to use just a quick example before you go on, but Councilmember Vasquez, that's also, you know, as we talk about this, it's also important to talk about site elevation, right? Because
Yes.
all these things begin to tie together in creating a single effect of what we're trying to achieve.
If we're thinking that we're going to have higher elevations, then I can see it having some value, but remember, there would have to be pretty high to get to that level.
Or you design it in a different way, you don't quite get as a return as, that was quite an extensive design you saw on the last slide. You might not be able to design it fully.
And then there's a good diagram from Black and Veatch showing the water table now, 40 years from now, and showing the current elevations before we're filling it, and you can see the volume available for absorption of the water.
Okay.
Yeah, and look, this isn't, if we wanted to, this is part of their overall drainage system. They won't be able to, the civil engineers won't be able to account for storage in that base course if there's a high water table. But, they can be designed if you have enough clear space between the water table. They can actually store a fair bit of water, about 30 to 40% void space in the rock course.
So Jeremy, back to this conversation on maintenance. Okay, I mean, I don't want to create village work. So we have a village employee running around all week looking at everybody's French drain, because that would be ludicrous. I mean, there's got to be a way that we can put in some type of requirement that some people turn in documentation that says they've approved that a third party has addressed this, or they've done it on their own or whatever. And they turn that into the village. Versus us going out and doing the inspections.
That's what I'll look for.
Yeah, it would be some sort of requirement for them to submit, a review, a certification of some sort.
Yeah, that's what I'll look for, is to see what kind of certifications, inspections are available.
And I look, I think, we've got 37, what do we have, 37 municipalities across the county, and, with this new. 34. So,
we're not the first rodeo.
So what's gonna happen over this next year as the county has made their new ordinance, they're gonna be 34 different municipalities writing ordinances, so, we can put our all heads together and pick up stuff from other municipalities as they do this as well.
It's also a implementation and execution, like if we require systems that are very high performance on the front end, that even if they're operating at 20% of their capacity, they're still operating. That's sort of another approach that we can take. And most of the systems that I'm showing here, the ones that I would be concerned about clogging more frequently are the pervious concrete and pervious asphalt. The other ones can be designed to really, unless something really goes bad or they come in and put asphalt over them, they're going to perform.
When they do these turf systems and they come back and they put because they always fail when they put grass in them, they come back and they put in artificial turf. Does that meet the requirement?
So currently the code does not allow artificial turf in the joints between pavers.
In the front of the house.
In the front of the house. Part of this ordinance, I actually want to allow the artificial turf. That was Councilmember London's suggestion a couple months ago, and I think it's very reasonable, and it's also a way, and again, as part of an overall permeable system, it's fine, as long as we limit it to really between pavers. I think it still meets the intent of the original.
And it has to meet
ordinance.
a certain pervious rating.
Right, yeah. So we'll create a rate of infiltration that's sort of the standard.
The artificial grass they make for dogs.
Yeah.
Like we have.
Yeah.
Drains
It goes right through.
Yeah, it's designed to drain. I mean, they use it on sports fields that have to drain very, very quickly. And then we're also, one of the other changes in the ordinance is right now, currently, because of the way the pervious requirement is stated, you're allowed to renovate or replace a driveway in an existing home and use impervious materials. So we want to close that loophole so that we're not having new concrete driveways constructed, which is some of the cases.
We want absorption of the water into the soil, right?
Sorry?
We want absorption of the water into the soil, not into the street, right?
That's the ideal. Yeah, we've got to hit it from all angles. Yeah, so again, what isn't pervious pavement, conventional concrete, asphalt, anything mud set pavements, mud set pavers, sand set pavers also are not pervious. Okay, so next I wanted to go through the potential freeboard changes. So I want to start, sorry if you've heard this one before, with the basics of what flood elevation is and why we have the different acronyms. This is from, base flood elevation is a function of computer models that predict the amount of flooding that you're going to get in a given space. FEMA has gone through and updated these models all over the East Coast, particularly Florida. It's been not without controversy as they've gotten better at modeling. Some people got bad news, some people got good news, mostly bad news. It's notable that Key Biscayne's didn't really change because we're a very, very sort of consistent site. We don't have a lot of obstructions. The offshore bathymetry is well known. We don't have a lot of variety from one end of the island to the other in terms of our topography. So we've stayed relatively consistent. You can see here, there's sort of the VE zone is the one where you're expecting a lot of wave action. So that really drops off very, very quickly from the immediate coast to the interior. And then what we have for the most part is coastal AE and AE, where you still have some wave action, but it's greatly reduced compared to what is the other coast. I chopped off the right side of the drawing because that's for higher places than we are. It doesn't really apply at all. So when we're talking about freeboard specifically, there's the base flood elevation, which is what your absolute minimum would be. And although Florida Building Code now says the absolute minimum is base flood plus 1 foot. So when we're talking about freeboard, what we're talking about is just like in a boat, is the distance between the water and the edge of your boat. In this case, it's really the freeboard is the distance between what's required and where you would where you would desire to be, or we would allow you to be above that minimum. So the term a lot of people use is design flood elevation as opposed to base flood elevation. So we have some functional challenges in our code that have discouraged people from going above the base flood plus 1, which is sort of the minimum. There's a couple elements to that discourage people, but the main one is we're still tied to the overall height of the building being tied to BFE plus 1. So whatever else you do, people like their tall ceilings, they like maximizing their space. So the minute, even if they want that insurance discount, even if they're sort of leaning towards, I'd rather be more resilient, we have this limit, so they end up losing usable space in their homes. So the reason this is becoming more of an issue is because the federal government recently released guidelines saying that their standard is really going to be BFE plus 2 moving forward. So any project that receives any federal funding, including through HUD, would be required to be built at plus 2. So there's additional benefits. We always put these in terms of, well, you can get a bigger insurance discount, but what we should be asking is, why do you get that insurance discount? Because you're actually less likely to have damage in a flood. And I think we should be moving to a place where we can offer that to new construction. But we're also not without challenges in Key Biscayne, because right now we're at this cusp where there's a lot of new construction that they have a understory, they have space below their building, but the second we start allowing them to go a bit higher, now that space is really going to become functional. So you're gonna go potentially away from what we currently have, which is people tend to elevate their lots to get to a home that's 4 or 5 feet above the street. the moment you go 2-3 feet higher than that, now maybe I want to keep my whole site down and I want to have stilts or a functional, non-air conditioned space
Non-livable.
below the home. So this really does have we're at that cusp of that +2, +3, where it could start to change how homes are built without consideration of other impacts in the code. So some of the other, we do have some flexibility in terms of wall height, but it's a fairly confusing part of the code that allows you to elevate and only get some of the penalty on your overall wall height. But we've seen it, right? We've seen multiple variances come in recently where one of the requests is, hey, I want to elevate my floor. Can I also then elevate the overall building?
So the other benefit, of course, is by elevating, you can have a garage under your house, and we have a problem with cars on the street. People have guests. If you elevate the house so it's at least 7 feet, then you can have a car underneath it.
What's the objection to have the higher elevation?
This is my question for you. This is not my call to make. There is policy implications in terms of.
Well, there were two parts, right? The overall height of the home.
Yeah.
Right.
Above 35 feet.
Above 35 feet.
And then the general look and feel and aesthetic of the
I'll
island.
give you a little history on this thing. I proposed this 10 years ago, 12, long time ago. I had half the architects on Key Biscayne coming here, along with Judd, saying, it might be a great idea, but it won't look good.
Right.
And therefore, it's not going to look good. We're not going to do it. So we stayed at the 10 feet. I proposed the BFV +2 back, not 2014 or 15, and I'm just telling you, brought all the architects out.
Take a little time to catch up to you.
Well, look, and I think things have changed, you know, and I hear it. I hear it from architects coming in, and generally their request is really, why can't we go a little bit higher? Why are we the typical question is, why are we being penalized for wanting to be more resilient?
So if we would maintain the 35-foot overall height and we raise up 2 feet, effectively the house is just going to be 37 feet tall versus.
That's right.
+1.
Yeah.
The structure's still going to be 30. The structure's still 35 feet. It's where you're measuring it from.
Once we change it.
But relatively going up 2 feet.
From a man on the street, literally a person standing in the street, that building's 2 feet taller.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I built BFE +2 20 years ago.
Yeah, so, and look, so that segues very nicely into talking about site elevation. Because if we want to discourage the impression of houses on stilts, we can do it through the zoning ordinance. If we're comfortable with it, we can allow the ordinance to adapt. But one of the other issues is if we want to, one of the issues we have right now is site elevation. These are your standards. You know, assuming a floor at BFE +1, your pool deck or your patio, the maximum elevation it can be is minus 2.5 feet below base flood elevation. So you're guaranteed to have steps down to your patio unless you're willing to have that patio count against your overall lot coverage. So it counts against your lot coverage in the same way that a covered space does.
Right.
So functionally, what happens is people aren't then having their pool decks or their back patios at the same elevation as the interior of their home. They're keeping them depressed at that minus 2.5 feet. Obviously, I think that's a question in and of itself, if that's a policy we want to keep. But it's also something we absolutely should address if we're allowing freeboard, because again, are you going to hold that at the minus 2.5 feet below BFE +1 and allow their interior to go that much higher, and now their deck is 3.5, 4.5 feet? It's a significant flight of stairs down.
But don't we also want them to be higher? The minimum because it means they'll put more dirt in there, it gives you more area to absorb water.
If we qualify it, that has to be non-compacted fill.
Well,
Yeah,
you specify that, that's
yeah,
not a problem.
I think we could specify that.
Why are we opposed to the houses on stilts in the first place?
To be clear, I am not. I'm just saying,
I didn't get an
it is
answer.
I mean, but that's not,
it's a big policy. It will change the look of new
But I think
construction.
you
on the
mentioned
Cape.
it. Ed,
Yeah.
Traditionally, it was a
Will it
little
make
bit
it
about
worse
the
or
look,
not?
right?
it's not a matter of, it's not,
Cost Nancy.
but we don't have an architectural design review board here, and that's not our intention.
No, although what we have a lot of elements in the zoning ordinance
That force that.
nudge, that don't necessarily force, but there's a lot of components that nudge design in one way or another.
Right.
There's two reasons, but it goes back a long time. One is proportionality, neighbors being proportionate to neighbors. And the other is to try to retain kind of an urbanistic streetscape relative to the street. So, and there's a lot of drawings and a lot of discussion, and generally over a long time, consensus developed around the policy that we're living with now.
Well, it's interesting because if you do have the houses with stilts, you do have more parking, you get the
Yeah.
cars off the
Well,
street, and
ju-
water can come and go.
Exactly. That's right.
You don't necessarily get the cars off the street because unless we're prescribing that those spaces be used as
They can't-
garages.
They can't be inhabitable.
No, but they can be
Storage.
outdoor kitchen, they can be storage, they can be any number of things that you would do in a back patio, but on an air-conditioned space.
But we can more regulate the car on the street as opposed to,
We could require it to be parked.
we could require.
Yeah, I
you
think-
park
I think-
on your property, not
Yeah.
on the street.
Yeah, it could be,
And the issue of them looking like a bunch of houses in stilts where there are all these other mackles is not really the case anymore.
No.
Because so many of the houses are already up.
and we are, I think we're gonna hit 100 construction sites in our single-family district this year. That's our guess at the rate
A lot
of
of Mackles are going on the
acceleration.
wayside.
So look, but it's, I'm not opining whether this is, which is right, but I'm just saying these are the implications. And so it's, as much as I'd love to say, oh, this is a no-brainer, let's just allow another 2 feet of freeboard, there's a lot of trickle-down effects because we're right at the cusp of these being the implications where, oh yeah, now that changes how that space can be used pretty drastically.
I'm glad Councilmember Kaplan brought up, because the one we didn't add in here is those incentives that we have to create that special design feel. So those would have to be considered as well, because those are benefiting certain people who design in a certain way, and then we might have to take those back.
Yeah, and it's.
And it begins to change the look and feel of the village. So it's, all these are good ideas, but it has to be looked at in totality.
And, currently.
So just to maybe start thinking about this, what Frank and Ed have said, in terms of maybe we need to get a group of, whatever, 7 architects or whatever you want, and have them start looking at this so that they can at least, square off on this thing early enough so that you don't come before us and with an ordinance that, is going to go nowhere.
Clearly explain the benefits, right?
My preferred technique, and this is how I've done thing in my previous jobs as well, is to handle it through public meetings and handle it through direct outreach to architects. I don't think we need to form a formal committee.
What would be the problem with doing that, though?
It takes more time, and I think
Time for who? For the architects or for
No,
us?
it takes
Or for
time
you?
for the architects, it takes time for me, it takes time for us to get to a conclusion. I don't think it's an efficient way to get where we want to go. I think we can handle it through, and by having a committee, it can actually be exclusive of a broader group.
Right. Just because we have a committee doesn't mean we can't have all kinds of public outreach. It's just that a committee can come with information about what different alternatives mean
Yeah, and I think I can get that same information, those same alternatives through public forum and through direct contact.
I think, I don't see why we wouldn't have
It's a redundant step that adds time.
I disagree.
Either way, I mean, the same people are gonna participate.
Yeah.
Are we in a hurry?
Yeah.
Well, if we're making decisions, we're in a hurry.
I
If
mean,
we're not.
Don't make
then-
that decision today, that's all I'm
Oh,
saying.
no, no.
No,
What's our
no, we don't need to make that decision. This is really
No,
just an
I'm saying, what's
introduction.
our- I'm just saying, we're talking 3 months, 6 months to make this kind of decision.
Look, the fact that the federal guidelines have already changed does light a little bit of a fire under us, I think.
That's for sure. The
Are
same
you
thing
saying,
happens every time.
excuse me, are you saying that the federal guideline change is going to impact flood insurance?
No, it affects anything receiving federal funding.
Right, but so our homes, our multifamily or single family are not going to be impacted by that.
Yeah, we're not getting a lot of HUD financing, I don't think.
Right.
No, but listen, we're under the basically subsidized Flood Control Act. And so that's where the BFE comes in. Well, you gotta comply with the BFE. And if they raise the BFE, and if we're below the BFE, and they're now what I understand, they have every individual house, they have the elevation of every house, so everything will be judged accordingly.
Yes.
So all of a sudden, your house is 10 feet, which is fine today, but tomorrow it's 12 feet, you're gonna pay a premium for that,
And
once
there's
they raise that.
and there's also the issue that, where HUD goes, others follow. Other financiers.
And that point about proportionality has changed because there's so much new construction.
Right.
So the disparity between the old houses and the new houses are diminished.
Yeah.
But you will find the same thing happens all the time, every single time. There's
I'm-
perfect ambivalence between the desire not to be regulated architecturally and the desire to avoid chaos. And the balancing of those two principles is chaotic.
Yeah.
So
That's
Jeremy,
zoning.
if you would just allow the 2-foot change and you raise the so effectively the building goes up 2 feet relatively to the street, okay? Outside of that, what other changes would you make?
Well, we'd want to look at site elevation for sure. I would recommend that we look at some of our current incentives. Like, for instance, I think one of the complaints that we regularly hear is that these houses feel massive and that they're looming over the street. And in fact, we offer an FAR bonus if you build closer to the street. Maybe we want to examine that. Maybe we want to give you a bonus for retaining more stormwater on site. Maybe instead of building closer to the street and making it feel like it's looming over the street. There is a disconnect between how we build now and the bonuses that we offer that I think go back to what before was a desire for a more urbanistic feeling that was based on, frankly, smaller homes as well. I think people were not regularly building the absolute maximum FAR until about 10 years ago.
Long before that, long before that.
No, but it wasn't normal. It wasn't normal, and the
It's
numbers
95%.
support that. Like this is a relatively new occurrence where
You look at
everyone is
all- you look at
maxing
all
out
old houses, you'll
FAR.
find 35 feet, 3,500 and 25 square foot houses, because that's the 47% of the 7,500 foot lot. Go check how many houses are exactly that number, because they all built to the extreme. I mean, just go check those numbers.
Yeah, but it's a relatively new trend.
Maybe not on Key Biscayne. That's
I'll
what I
check
think
the
Ed's driving at.
Okay, let's wrap it up.
So what we wanted to do, Mayor, is just kind of give an overview. Obviously, very complex conversations. It obviously addresses, attempts to address some of our flooding issues, but at the same time, it really takes a look at how the village looks. So however we approach it, whether we do it through community meetings or some sort of committee, this is going to have to be looked at pretty thoroughly.
Good presentation, Jeremy.
All right. Anything else for the good of the order here?
See you in 2 weeks.
Yep. Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
We're adjourned.